Chapter 66. A Great Tonic Bonus. You do realize Kamiyama Ryo is Uzumaki Kushina's lover, right? You want me to cut in as the third party. What does that make me? Kushina is my best friend. Her eyes rimmed red, both hands clutching the front of her kimono, her body trembling. The guilt toward her friend she had forced down, and the fear of her own ambition, surged back up. In Uchiha Setsuna's clouded old eyes flashed the look of someone unsurprised, mocking and impatient, as if at a child who did not understand the world. He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a hiss, cold as a snake's tongue slipping into the ear. Friend. Best friend. Ha. A contemptuous snort rumbled from his nose. Makoto, put away that pointless sympathy. Use the mind I have honed in you and see reality. A glint shot through the murk of his eyes. That best friend of yours, Uzumaki Kushina, he enunciated each word like a blade, she is the future Nine-Tails Jinchuriki in waiting. That is her essence. What? Makoto's pupils shrank. It felt like a bucket of ice water dumped over her head. The shock wrenched a soundless cry from her. Konoha's Jinchuriki. That carefree, big-hearted Kushina she knew, a vessel for the nine-tailed fox. Watching his granddaughter blanch, Setsuna spoke with cruel certainty. This is top secret, but an iron rule the leadership accepts. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is the village's greatest weapon and deterrent. And that means she is a caged canary. She will never be free. Her existence is to seal the Nine Tails. When the next Jinchuriki is of age, the beast is transferred to the new container. And her. Best case, she fades away in some hidden corner. Worst, she dies on some dark operating table, or gets drained as a sacrifice. Setsuna's words stabbed like poisoned ice balls into Makoto's heart. See it now. The Konoha leadership will never allow someone like her to marry, much less to conceive. His tone hammered at the core obstacle, cold with worldly certainty. Childbirth by a Jinchuriki could bring disaster on Konoha. She and Ryo were never destined to end well. That is a fixed reality. And, he pivoted, deliberately coaxing, as a Jinchuriki, she can never leave the village's cage. You, better than anyone, should know what that means. Makoto felt the strength drain out of her. She staggered half a step back, her spine striking the cold paper lattice with a dull thud. Jinchuriki, caged, operating table, destined tragedy, no freedom. The words whirled and sliced through her mind. Her earlier worry that Ryo might leave after graduation, the small, childish fear of losing him, felt laughably naive. Kushina's future was dyed in primordial black. Her laughter and sweetness with Ryo now looked like poison flowers blooming on the edge of an abyss, brief and fatal. Setsuna's tone softened at just the right moment, the practiced whisper of a schemer certain of his investment, a devil's murmur threading Makoto's turmoil. In Ryo, you have seen his power, his potential with your own eyes. A terror that swept half of Konoha. He will surely leave the cage that holds the Jinchuriki and soar like an eagle. Under Tsunade's lead, he is destined for the bloodiest battlefields. A cold arc tugged at the corner of his mouth. Makoto, that is your opportunity. Now, think carefully about the road I have paved for you since childhood. He pinned her with a look, savoring his long game. Kushina will be locked in the village as the new Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. And I had you work your way close to her, into her circle. Did you truly think it was just to keep up appearances between Uchiha and Uzumaki? Childish. Look now, you are about to be a formal teammate of Kamiyama Ryo. He stepped in, energized. Field hospital and front lines, those will become the perfect stage to apply what you have learned. Remember, I hired the finest bridal tutors for you since you were small, spent blood and breath honing your strategy, bearing, and speech. I taught you how to read faces, steer emotions, grasp a man's weaknesses. I even allowed you to use those means to help your best friend Kushina get closer to Ryo. You thought it was some girlish game of friendship. His voice lowered, thick with wicked allure. No. Every so-called strategy you taught Kushina, every contact with Ryo under the banner of helping her, each was practice. Each sharpened the blade named bridal training forged for you. Each was rehearsal for the final moment, when fate itself clears the obstacle named Kushina, so you can slip in seamlessly and take the opening. Picture it. When Ryo is out bleeding on the field, you are the one by his side with tactical support and solace. When he is loneliest and most dejected, you, the comrade who understands him best, whom he trusts most, are there to listen, to stay. Fervor lit Setsuna's eyes. With my granddaughter's wit, and these years of hammer-and-anvil bridal training, that powerful man will fall wholly into your hand. That is the road to lift Uchiha's glory to Konoha's peak. In the future, you will stand upon this land and look down upon the Hokage's shadow. Makoto, remember this. Power is a woman's tonic, and it is a great tonic. Grandfather would never harm you. Hokage's wife. The words became a real crown, cold and heavy, yet dazzling to the point of vertigo. Power is a woman's tonic. A great tonic. Setsuna's words dropped into the dead water of her heart like stones. Wicked ripples spread outward, no longer merely furtive delight, but poison mixed with honey, steeped in the reek of betrayal and the greed to possess. Thump, thump. Makoto could hear her own heart pounding, dense drumbeats against fragile ribs. A scalding torrent named ambition smashed the dikes named friendship and guilt in an instant. Hokage's wife. Uchiha's glory. Master of the village to come. One beneath 10,000 above. The words gathered into an irresistible flood, grinding Kushina's face, stamped now with doomed tragedy, beneath its weight. The brutal essence of that bridal training flared in her mind. It had never been about the romance of first love strategies. It was power politics at its coldest. She was a weapon, honed to breach the target man. Setsuna's aim was always sharp and cold, use her as the tether to bind a boundless talent with Hokage's potential, Ryo, and drag Uchiha back to Konoha's core, washing away decades of exclusion. The insight, feigned gentleness, and mastery of hearts she had learned were blades serving this bargain. Duty. Belonging. Absurdity yawned before her. Her value, in the end, was a stepping stone for the clan's return to power, a more ornate chess piece. To be taught love only to steal more efficiently, to take. Kushina's naive, proud face and Ryo's indulgent downward gaze ripped back and forth in her mind. Her best friend's unreserved trust and the surging betrayal within her twined like two venomous snakes, tearing her spirit ragged. Her nails bit deeper into her palm. Sharp pain tamped the turmoil. She lowered her lashes. The dark fringe cast deep shadows across her pale cheeks, hiding the storm and leaving only heavy fatigue and a helpless struggle. I will think about it. The 5 words scraped out between her teeth, draining her strength. Was it surrender, delay, or the reflex buffer of someone torn by pressure and temptation? Setsuna caught it, the wavering spark deep in her eyes, guttering then flaring again, now tinged with a new certainty in her capability. A subtle satisfaction flickered in his murky gaze. Enough. The seed had been planted. Press further and he would spoil it. His old eyes eased, like a wily fox catching the scent of prey stepping into a snare. Good, good, Makoto. He reined in his force and resumed the solemn elder's tone, even with a faint, nearly soothing note. Grandfather will not force you. Think it over. As for Fugaku, Setsuna snorted. In time, I will see him kept away from you. I, Uchiha Setsuna, do not need a weak Grand-in-law. He is unworthy. He gave Makoto a long, loaded look, then turned and strode down the corridor, leaving the weight of choice on the shoulders of a girl whose heart was a snarl, and whose ambition now burned bright. His figure vanished past the door. The air held only a musty scent, rotted wood mixed with naked ambition. A few days later, news of Tsunade's return spread through Konoha. Morning mist clung low. The Uchiha compound remained deathly still. Heavy wooden fences sliced the gray light into bars, like a cage's ribs. Makoto drew a deep breath. The cold stung her lungs. Setsuna's poison hummed through her veins. The mantra of bridal training echoed like a spell. The specter of Hokage's wife burned against her eyelids. She straightened her back. The first step toward Konoha's power center had to be clean. Creak. A familiar face squeezed out of the shadow by the gate. Fugaku rolled his sleeves and forced what he thought was a tender smile. Makoto, shall we? Before he finished, Makoto swept past in long, decisive strides. Her fingers clenched and opened inside her sleeve, steady, no tremor. She stamped to a halt, pivoted. Sunlight lit half her face at last. Her step paused for only a heartbeat. No hesitation. No preface. Just as Fugaku arranged his habitual smile and opened his mouth for the same tired lines, Makoto slipped in like a cold wind, closing to a single pace before him. Too close, close enough that Fugaku could see the permafrost compacted deep in her dark pupils. Instinct prickled. Something was wrong. His smile froze. His Adam's apple bobbed. Makoto spoke in a tone deliberately calibrated, a noblewoman's cool clarity bestowed by her bridal training, her pace even and crisp, not a ripple in her voice, yet striking like a judge's anvil. Fugaku-kun. She even shifted to the most distant honorific. Thank you for your past regard and feelings. But. She lifted her face and met his startled eyes. Each word precise to coldness, like a wintry gust nailing him in place. You are a good man. Fugaku's expression locked, a plaster mask flash frozen on his face. Makoto paused deliberately. Her gaze swept over his face as if appraising a trivial, flawed item. Are completely incompatible. The words fell like ice. She did not wait for any response. Before his expression could fully collapse into shock and humiliation, she turned on her heel. Her black ponytail drew an arc in the air without a hint of reluctance, slicing past his slack mouth. Something snapped in that instant: restraint, endurance, the disgust for clan-arranged marriage. The sheer pleasure of rejection roared up like lava, searing her insides. That furtive unwillingness born from Kushina was swallowed by the flame of exhilaration. This, too, was in the curriculum: when a target's value is insufficient, the most dignified, yet most lethal farewell. She could almost hear Fugaku's shocked gasp behind her. Her steps quickened. Wooden clogs tapped the stone. Talk, 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 crisp beats shattering 10 years of forced gentleness. The shadow of the Uchiha estate reeled back. The leaden lump in her gut peeled away. The street to the Hokage building unfurled ahead. At its end stood the eagle fated to fly, and the light fated not to belong only to her best friend. She strode away without looking back. Wind teased the wisps over her brow. Her pace was steady and swift along the gravel-strewn path. She left the gates without a backward glance, leaving Uchiha Fugaku frozen in place, ears ringing with that cold, knife-edged, "You are a good man," and the lingering trace of her sharper, prouder aura. Sunlight slanted across his vacant face. Didn't she call me Fugakuni just the other day? His baffled mutter drifted after her, as if through a thick wall of water. At the corner of Makoto's lips, the curve of satisfaction widened, silently. To be continued. Check out my new FIC, Naruto, Reborn as a Daimyo. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. If you enjoy the story, please consider leaving a review, it helps a lot. Hollow Diamond. Don't forget to add the book to your library. Here you go. Junkdog creators' thoughts. 11 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 67. Damn Hiruzen. Time shifts back to a few days earlier. Aim no Kuni front line. The low, leaden sky sagged. Endless cold rain drenched the sodden earth of Aim no Kuni, turning the muddy trenches into wide, murky pits. The air reeked of wet soil, blood, and the stubborn stench of rotting medicinal herbs. In Konoha's hastily assembled command post, oil lamps guttered and threw dim light. A huge situation map, its edges soaked by rain, sprawled across the table. Tiny flags marking friend and foe bristled over it like a hedgehog's spines. Shimura Danzo sat at the head. Days of strain had swollen the bags under his eyes like two overripe prunes, and bloodshot veins crawled across the whites. Even the mantle signifying Konoha's supreme battlefield command was spattered with dried mud and ink. Trash. An entire platoon, wiped out again by that old hag Chio's poison mist. Danzo slammed a fist into the oak tabletop. The dull thud sent several dossiers skidding off a corner. Hanzo's poison rain piled over Suna's stiffening toxins. This damned Aim no Kuni is one giant gas chamber. What comes in every day is not the wounded, it is meat waiting to die. He pinched the bridge of his nose. His temples throbbed. He felt like an old wolf trapped in a pit, snarling without relief. Watching the death toll climb coldly on reports, hearing the wails from the front, this was a slow knife carving flesh. It would drive a shinobi mad. What made it feel like swallowing flies was Tsunade. The granddaughter of the Shodai, grandniece of the Nadaime, Konoha's princess, now blazed like a beacon in the field hospital. Every time that golden hair appeared in a tent of the gravely wounded, the green glow of Shozen no Jutsu, mystical palm technique, bloomed, and that soft yet massive Katsuyu split and spread to cover the injured, the camp would rise in honest gratitude. Thank you, Tsunadesima. Those words pricked Danzo's ears like needles. It was him, Shimura Danzo, sitting here, wringing his mind dry to analyze intelligence, deploy forces, bearing the pressure of supreme command, stitching together a collapsing line. Yet who received the thanks of those mudleggers? Tsunade. It was she who dragged men the reports had already consigned to the dead back from the gate of hell, again and again. Her names, Saint of Medical Ninjutsu, Slug Princess, spread among soldiers and junior officers, and even began to overshadow him, the commander in the center. That honor, that popular support, should have been the harvest after victory, the laurel that lifted Danzo to the summit. And now, all of it was flowing to Tsunade, a flood he could not ignore. Damn woman. Danzo swore under his breath, a gleam of gloom cutting through his eyes. More than once, in the insomnia of exhausted nights, a dangerous thought born of frustrated jealousy had stirred. If there were no Tsunade, casualties would spike, morale would crumble, the war would turn even bloodier. Yet in the end, the honor of a Pyrrhic victory, or of grinding the enemy down, would fall wholly to Danzo. He was the commander of this meatgrinder. The thought flickered up, and he stamped it out. No. He forced it down at once. Without Tsunade, the front would collapse immediately. Chio's new toxins kept coming. Hanzo's Reinin were ghosts. With no medical pillar from Tsunade and that disgusting but indispensable Katsuyu, they would never last to the day Suna ran dry. If the front shattered for lack of medical support, Danzo knew the man in the Hokage's office would not spare him. That seemingly gentle Hiruzen would seize the chance and dump every charge and chamber pot on Danzo's head. Hokage's aid fails, leading to the collapse of the Aim no Kuni front. That one line could end his political life on the spot and nail him to a pillar of shame forever. What talk of Hokage then? Danzo-sama, urgent transmission. A masked root operative slipped into the tent like a ghost, knelt on one knee, and presented a tightly sealed scroll with both hands. Rain dripped from his cold armor onto the floor. Danzo's heart sank. At times like this, the word, urgent, was the last thing he wanted. He snatched the scroll, poured chakra into his fingertips, and ripped the sealing script open. The scroll unfurled. The first was from Konoha's Hokage Tower, bearing the flaming seal of the Sandaime, Hiruzen. Special order. One of the Sannin, Tsunadihime, upon receipt is to immediately disengage from the front and return to Konoha headquarters at once, without fail. Signed, Hokage Hiruzen. Addendum. Matter is classified. Details will be given in person. Recall Tsunade. Danzo's brows knotted. The front was deadlocked, the poison threat unresolved. Recall Orochimaru and Jiraiya, fine, but summon away Tsunade, the medical corps, at this exact moment. Had the Hiruzen gone mad? He burned to know why, but the scroll held only the cold order and the word, classified. A fresh sting of being shut out from the inner circle rose. He was the highest commander on the battlefield, yet he was not told why a corps general had to be pulled back urgently. He almost tore open the second scroll in anger. This one came from Root's secret note in Konoha, his true ears. Its phrasing was colder and more detailed. Though the body was not to be reproduced, a handful of conclusory phrases pierced Danzo's mind like ice awls. Mental power outburst, a massive psychic shock blanketing the entire village, preliminary center point of the burst, Kamiyama Ryo, triggered widespread panic, chaos, hidden damage to infrastructure, estimated energy level of the shock source, cage class or higher, destructive power and range assessed as follows, data attached, extreme hazard. Kamiyama, Ryo. Danzo clenched the scroll so hard it almost tore. The name branded itself on his memory like a red-hot iron. In an instant he recalled the smoke-filled office years ago, how highly he had valued that fearsome commoner brat, how he had asked Hiruzen to place that born root seedling in his hand. And then, the light on him, it grows best under the sun, inheritor of the will of fire. Hiruzen takes all. That damned refusal, heavy with moral superiority, rang in his ears. And that damned line. I, Danzo, refuse. Smothered. A suffocation that could flip his blood surged from his soles to his crown. Years flashed like lantern slides. His desire to bring the boy named Ryo into root, Hiruzen's rejection, the pivot to demanding control of the Jinchuriki Uzumaki Kushina, Hiruzen parading Mito to refuse again, and finally, even the bright prospect of Ryo was cut off when Tsunade took him as a disciple. All that bottled fury found a fuse in this instant. Ah! Bloodshot eyes drilled into the name on the scroll, Ryo. This brat had thrown Konoha into a terror like that. But this power. This potential. This report's assessment of Kajin above. It was power Danzo had recognized years ago, tried to claim for root, to forge into Konoha's sharpest hidden blade. It should have been his. Roots. Now that strength, that fang he had craved, had once again been snatched and flaunted by the one man he hated most, Hiruzen. Hiruzen. Danzo ground his back molars. His breath came hard. His chest heaved, every inhalation heavy with resentment and venom. You stole from me again. You greedy thief. That power, that Ryo, should have been my blade. Mine. Helpless rage and the sting of betrayal gnawed at him. He could already see Hiruzen in the Konoha office, smugly admiring the tool named Ryo, while pushing all blame for rear area disruption onto someone else. Why? Why did all good assets and seedlings fall into Hiruzen's lap? Disgusting. He shielded the Jinchuriki. He hoarded a potential stock like Ryo. Was the fat harvest all his orchard? Blood rushed to Danzo's head. He hammered the table. The oil lamp shuddered hard, light and shadow careening across the tent walls. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on Pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 68. Danzo's boiling point. Messenger. Danzo's voice was hoarse and filled with fury. Immediately. Right now. Tell Tsunade to get herself over here, now. He nearly roared the words, releasing all the frustration that had been suffocating him for days. The messenger flinched under the weight of his anger, standing rigid. Why yes, Danzo-sama. He stumbled out of the tent, almost tripping as he sprinted toward the medical camp. Danzo slumped heavily into his chair, eyes shut, chest heaving. Perhaps it was for the best that Tsunade had been away. At least he didn't have to see her basking in praise every day, surrounded by gratitude at the medical camp, while his pride burned in silence. He knew perfectly well that once she left, the casualty numbers on the front lines would soar. The medical corps relied on her completely. But so what? If soldiers died by the hundreds, that would be Hiruzen's fault for recalling her, not his. Accountability. Let the Hokage bear it. His gaze fell on the intelligence scroll lying on the table, a report from the root. The name written there, Kamiyama Ryo, gleamed in his mind like a poisoned blade. Outside, the rain kept pouring, beating against the thin canvas roof like a war drum, relentless and urgent. The sound drowned out the restless anger and venomous thoughts twisting in Danzo's chest. The air inside the tent was colder and heavier than the storm outside. A guard's cautious voice came from beyond the curtain. Danzo-sama, Tsunade-sama has arrived. Danzo drew in a deep breath, forcing down the rage that threatened to boil over. Not yet. It isn't time yet. The Hokage's seat is still out of reach. Tsunade, I can't afford to make her my enemy now. I still need her, or at least, I can't afford to make her an obstacle. Tsunade pushed the curtain aside and stepped in. Her green medical vest carried the scent of herbs and dust, mixed with the damp chill of rain. The smell cut through the stuffy air inside the tent. Her golden hair was tied loosely, slightly disheveled. Her sharp eyes swept over the shattered sand table and Danzo's darkened face. If you have something to say it fast. The medical camp is full of men waiting for stitching and detox. I don't have time for politics. Her tone was edged with irritation. She was exhausted and had no patience left for this old man's ideals. Danzo's face remained unreadable. He tossed a scroll onto the desk in front of her. The motion carried a trace of suppressed anger. The village's order. Tsunade, you are to return to Konoha immediately. Tsunade's brows furrowed. She didn't even glance at the scroll before glaring at him. Immediately. Has that old man lost his mind? Does he even know what the situation is out here? Chio's poisons evolve every day. The medical tents are filled with comrades hanging between life and death. If I leave, how many will die by tomorrow? Her voice rose sharply, cutting through the heavy air like nails striking wood. To her, as a doctor, the lives of the wounded always came before politics. If it had been any other time, Danzo would have lectured her about the greater good, the cruelty of the ninja world, or the necessity of sacrifice. He might even have called her compassion a weakness. But right now, his anger over the intelligence report and his resentment toward Hiruzen's orders were twisting inside him. The command is right there, Danzo said coldly, his tone like steel scraping ice. I'm only delivering it. It bears the Hokage's seal, Hiruzen's personal stamp. You will comply, or not. He deliberately emphasized the words Hokage and Hiruzen, reminding her of authority and washing his hands of responsibility. His eyes seemed to say, this isn't my doing. If you have a problem, take it up with the Hokage. If you dare. Tsunade's hand clenched into a tight fist, her knuckles whitening. She snatched up the scroll and unrolled it quickly. There was nothing but a terse recall order, no explanation, no reason. A chill crept into her chest. Not directed at Danzo, but something deeper, instinctive. The last time she had felt this way was right before her second grandfather, Tobarama, fell in battle. Her instincts had never been wrong. The fury in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by a sharp urgency. Konoha is in danger. A major danger. Something grave enough that she was needed immediately. That certainty overrode everything else, even her medical duty. Tsunade drew a deep breath, steadying herself. Fine. If it's an emergency summons from the village, I'll leave at once. But, she said sharply, her eyes blazing, I'm taking all critically injured soldiers who need long-term treatment. I won't leave them here to die. I'll compile all antidote inventories and suppressant formulas before I go. The medical squad can hold against Chio's poisons for a while, but remember, they can only suppress them, not cure the new strains. Tell the front lines to minimize assaults and avoid unnecessary casualties. And one more thing. She walked to the table, grabbed a blank scroll, and began writing swiftly. This contains my research notes on Chio's toxins and the framework for potential counteragents. It's the medical unit's final fallback plan. Her thoughts were sharp and orderly, her battlefront experience condensed into clear directives. Danzo listened in silence, his expression blank. He knew she was right. This was the best possible course. Taking the worst injured back reduced losses. Leaving behind antidotes and plans stabilized morale. Maintaining communication ensured continuity. He wanted desperately to keep her here, healing his men and strengthening his command. But Hiruzen's recall order, and the disturbing report about Ryo, left him no choice. If he tried to stop her now, morale would collapse, and Tsunade's backlash could destroy him. Understood, he said through clenched teeth. He knew her worth, and he hated that he had to let her go. HMPH. Tsunade didn't bother with another word. She gathered her notes and scrolls, turned sharply, and strode out into the rain. Her footsteps faded into the storm and the distant cries of the wounded. The tent fell silent again, the air heavier than before. Danzo stood motionless, staring after her, his face unreadable. With Tsunade gone, the front line would bear even greater strain. And in Konoha, Hiruzen, and that cursed, super weapon, that should have been his, Kamiyama Ryo. The intelligence report echoed in his mind. A mental energy output covering 2/3 of Konoha. Power approaching Kage-level threat potential. Hiruzen, you old fool. You hoard every treasure and dump every problem on the front lines. I drown in blood and mud while you sit in your office and hide a monster like this from me. A long, ragged breath escaped Danzo's lips, thick with resentment. He picked up the scroll about Ryo, his fingers tightening until the edges crumpled. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and suffocating. He turned toward the sand table, staring at the blurred markings of Hill 3 through the damp haze. The war continued. Shimura Danzo would keep fighting in this swamp of blood and ambition. And on the scales in his heart, the ones marked Hokage, a new, heavyweight named Kamiyama Ryo had just been added to Hiruzen's side. That imbalance made the darkness in Danzo's eyes deepen even further. To be continued. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 69. Late at night, did Kushina come to the door? Bonus. On the scroll of Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Technique, the intricate and arcane spatial nodes stared back like a silent mockery at anyone trying to decipher them. And Shrank Kinjutsu was worthy of its name. Without a solid foundation in Fuinjutsu, attempting to anchor spatial coordinates was no different from throwing sand by hand in the middle of a storm. To make up for lost time, he summoned dozens of Kage Bunshin at once. This Kinjutsu demanded enormous chakra and a robust life force, but with his vast mental power and unusual physique, he could bear it. The clones worked like a precision assembly line, efficiently parsing and memorizing the sigil schematics and energy node theory of Hiraishin. However, committing it to memory was one thing. Putting it into practice was another. The symbols on the scroll writhed and warped like living tadpoles. Every step of sensing, anchoring, and phase shifting each spatial node jammed up against the same door, the one labeled, Fundamentals of Fuinjutsu. The Uzumaki clan's Fuinjutsu was the anchor that allowed Hiraishin to cross space. What he lacked was precisely that core. Efficiency is too low. Ryo dropped the torn scroll pieces with a cold snap. Tsunade would be returning soon, and his own deployment to the front drew closer by the hour. Before then, he had to master the core application of Hiraishin, not to become some fearsome wraith-like assassin like Namikaze Minato, but to reach any battlefield instantly and stand by Kushina's side, tearing apart any threat. Long distance, pure spatial jumps, as fast as possible. Kushina's bright eyes flashed through his mind. Right. The deep Fuinjutsu foundation she had absorbed under Mito since childhood was the key to unlocking Hiraishin's threshold for him now. Outside the old Senju residence, the great Hokage rock loomed like a silent guardian. Ivy sprawled lush and green, crawling over the stone walls of the compound. Ryo lifted his hand. Before his knuckles touched the old wooden gate, it creaked open a crack. What peeked out was not the fiery, fluffy red hair he had expected, but a wary face. You again. Nawaki wedged himself in the doorway with a scowl, one leg subconsciously pulling back half a step. Last time you broke 2 of my legs. The time before that you blew one off. Granny hasn't even settled accounts with you yet. You. His tone sounded less like pure anger and more like a picky little brother sizing up a future brother-in-law. After all, the family had long tacitly accepted his relationship with Kushina. It was just that Ryo himself didn't seem fully adjusted to that shift. Ryo's mouth twitched. As for Naoki's blown off leg, it had been a scrape from a seal tag he himself had set to detonate during extreme training. The unlucky brat was just jumpy now about anything that came near him, classic paranoia. Move, Naoki. Mito's aged yet steady voice carried through the courtyard. Naoki pouted and shuffled aside. Mito stood beneath a maple tree, her dark kimono giving her an unusually grave air. Ryo, for Kushina's safety, she cannot go out these days and cannot receive visitors. She looked at him and got straight to the point. You came for Fuinjutsu. You want to learn. Ryo nodded, concise and direct. I need it for Hiraishin. Mito's clouded but still keen eyes paused on his face for a moment, then softened with understanding. You can. She turned the subject at once, gesturing to a neat row of rooms along the west side of the yard and handed him a key with an old wooden tag. You can only study here. Move in. The key sat heavy in his palm. Ryo asked nothing else. Kushina was grounded, and a sudden weight in Mito's voice had leaked through for just an instant. It was like the last tide at dusk, surging and then receding, carrying an unspoken sense of something about to fade away. He did not say it aloud. Uzumaki Mito, the first Hokage's widow who had once shaken the world, did not have much time left. Kushina was the successor she had nurtured with everything she had. Keeping him here made it convenient for him to learn Fuinjutsu, and it also added a reliable layer of protection for Kushina during a critical period. The calm arrangement felt like a silent entrustment. He inclined his head again. Naoki nearly jumped. Granny, he's moving in. If he moves in, can my legs even survive? Mito gave her grandson a flat look. If you break them a few more times, you will get used to it. Think of it as pre-war rehearsal so you don't get blown to pieces for real later. Naoki's face collapsed at once, eyes flicking between Ryo and Mito with tragic resignation, especially regarding the future of his legs. So, a special uninvited guest took up residence in the west wing of the Senju compound. At dawn the next day, the atmosphere of Fuinjutsu training in the guest room hardened to an almost solid intensity. In the spacious room, he sat Caesar. Before him hovered a model of runes woven from chakra, packed tight and flickering with dim blue light. A clone of Kushina sat across from him, trying hard to put on a strict little teacher act, explaining how to use chakra threads to precisely construct stable spatial restraint field nodes. At Ryo's side, 7 or 8 of his own clones popped one after another into white smoke. He kept his eyes shut, his brows knit tight. On the screen of his mind, several basic spatial anchor models collapsed in succession, leaving ragged tears in space. TCH. The Kushina clone nearby couldn't help stamping her foot. Even as a mouthpiece for the original, she could clearly sense Kushina's frustration and the obstacles in front of them. Your mental power is ridiculous, but your Fuinjutsu basics are full of holes. You skewed the most basic spatial stabilization seal 3 times in a row. Learn Hiraishin. She planted her hands on her hips, rattling off the kind of jabs the original would never say to his face. That's like trying to build a castle in the sky without tamping the foundation. Dream on. Ryo opened his eyes, silver light flowing in his pupils. The geometric optimum for node energy convergence. He pointed at the lingering afterimage of the collapsed model, laying out the same analysis. The Kushina clone blinked, then rolled her eyes. Idiot. The optimum alone is useless. Energy flow doesn't move in straight lines. You have to factor the node's own tolerance threshold and how chakra nature changes impact spatial stability. As she spoke, she drew up Palagold chakra and swiftly formed a more complex and precise 3-dimensional model before him. Lines of script danced at her fingertips, weaving like living threads into a basic framework that looked intricate yet extremely stable. Look, this is the base structure that actually resists spatial shear. The one you made. Her tone dripped with disdain. Use that in real combat for Hiraishin, and the first spatial fold will blow you into paste. The small clone pointed and lectured with the flair of a little empress of Fuinjutsu. She didn't notice that her expressions and gestures made Ryo momentarily see the original Kushina's usual hopping, tooth and claw demeanor. Continue. Ryo kept it brief and closed his eyes again. More clones burst and reformed with rapid pops, plunging into the next round of even wilder simulations. Weak fundamentals. Then he would fill the gap by brute forcing it with exceptional will and nearly inexhaustible mental power. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room with only a thin wall between them, the real Kushina had cocooned herself in her blanket, rolling around like a shrimp tossed in a hot pan. Her cheeks were so hot she could have cooked a pancake on them. For all her solemn act when teaching through a clone during the day, her real thoughts were in chaos. Makoto's dating upgrade guide, whispered to her in secret at the Hokage building, echoed in her head like a bewitching mantra, looping nonstop. Create natural physical contact. Nighttime, alone, just the right amount of care is the golden opportunity. Take the initiative, but act casual. He had moved in. Right in the next room, only a wall away. No, no, no. Kushina shook her head like mad, trying to banish the thoughts painting her face crimson. But that thunderous heartbeat wouldn't quiet down. She recalled how Mito had suddenly become strict about her fuinjutsu training lately. She didn't know the specifics, but a faint, uneasy haze hung over everything. Even so, another feeling quickly pushed that thought aside. That big blockhead Ryo had been grinding ninjutsu all day, clones blowing one after another. He had to be exhausted at night. Checking on his body and mental state was basic. Obviously. Yes, it was simple concern. Pure concern. Pumping herself up, Kushina sprang out of bed. She fussed with her trademark red hair in front of a small mirror, then, after a moment's hesitation, took off her ordinary outerwear. Underneath she wore only a close-fitting cotton short nightdress that fell to mid-thigh. She nervously tugged the hem down, revealing straight legs wrapped in over the neat pure white stockings. She took a deep breath, let it out slowly, then tiptoed like a little cat thief to Ryo's door. Holding her breath, she pressed an ear to the wood and listened carefully. Inside, there was only the faint, low hum of chakra circulation. Kushina's hand trembled as she carefully pulled the door open a crack and poked half her head inside. Her cheeks were pink. Her voice was a mosquito's buzz, with a nervous tremor she couldn't hide. Ryo, are you still practicing? Ryo lifted his eyelids. Those silver eyes looked especially deep in the dim light, like the deep sea. In the doorway's shadow stood Kushina, freshly bathed. A few damp strands of vivid red clung to her fair cheeks flushed with a rosy sheen. The cool short nightdress fit with awkward shyness. That strip of pure white just over the knees set off the slim, lively lines of her legs. She was enveloped in a warm mist, fresh and dewy, carrying a clean, gentle sweetness. So late. Ryo's voice was steady as always, though his gaze lingered on her for a moment. Ahem. Kushina cleared her throat and forced herself to act composed as she slipped fully through the crack and gently shut the door behind her. Her heart pounded like a drum. I saw you, using clones so hard all day. You must be mentally spent. Do you want me to? To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 70. At your age. Kushina's face grew redder as she spoke, and her voice grew softer. I can massage your head. When I had headaches before, Grandma pressed here and it helped. She looked up at Ryo, clutching the hem of her skirt with nervous fingers. Her sapphire eyes were bright with a mix of expectation and fluster. Ryo's gaze passed over the tips of her reddened ears and her tense, intertwined fingers. He stayed silent for 3 seconds. The chakra that had been running fast in his body from working on Horizon settled slightly. The faint scent of soap and herbs clung to the anxious girl. He gave a low acknowledgement and let his body relax a fraction. It was tacit permission. He was tired. Breathing in Kushina's clean scent and that warm, familiar fragrance, a brief ripple of distraction passed through his chest. Success. Kushina lit up like a child who had sneaked a candy. She held down her excitement and quickly knelt beside his bedding. Ryo turned his back to her. She extended her small hands, fingertips a little cool, and carefully touched his temples. Feeling the warmth and firmness beneath her fingers, her hand trembled. Relax. She muttered softly, imitating Mito's technique in doing her best to ignore the solid feel of muscle. She pressed with the pads of her fingers, worried that too light would be useless and too heavy would be uncomfortable. Clumsy, but earnest. Her warm fingertips worked at the acupoints. A few loose strands of hair brushed his neck as she moved, carrying the clean scent of soap in her own simple fragrance. Ryo shut his eyes. The jumbled symbols of the day receded. Tense nerves began to loosen under the careful, cool touch. A thread of odd comfort spread from his temples. He leaned back the slightest bit, allowing her to draw a little closer. Sensing his change in breathing, Kushina brightened. Her courage grew. She shifted a little closer, steady and focused. Here, and here. Grandma says this point helps the most. Her slender fingers, now warmer, moved from the temples to the back of his neck, searching out acupoints with care. Each press, each brush of hair, dropped like pebbles into the calm lake of his mind, sending quiet ripples across the surface. His clean scent mixed with the faint sweetness that was uniquely hers. Her heartbeat raced. Time flowed by quietly. Only their faint breaths sounded in the room. After several days of this routine, she felt the timing was right. Following Makoto's step-by-step advice had worked. The pace between her and Ryo had indeed warmed quickly. Kushina's courage increased. She rubbed her palms nervously against her skirt, took a deep breath, and, face flushed, patted her own knee. Hey! Kushina's voice suddenly sounded. With some hesitation and a bit of Doherty resolve, she broke the warm quiet of the room. She stopped her hands, cheeks burning hotter, and lowered her voice. If you lie here, on my lap, it might work better. Ryo paused for a moment at the suggestion. Looking at the space she indicated, he exhaled once and shook his head without hesitation. No. This is fine. They had kept the massage routine proper these past few days. It helped him settle, and that was enough. Kushina grew anxious at once. Her shyness flipped into determined insistence. No. Try it. Grandma said it really helps you relax. Do you think I can't do it right? She rocked slightly, flustered but stubborn. Ryo met her wide blue eyes, saw the look that said she would not let it go, and let his resistance drop. He let out a small, almost inaudible sigh. Suit yourself. He adjusted his posture and relaxed his support so he could rest more comfortably. Kushina straightened, steadying herself to support him. The weight was not light, but what she focused on was keeping calm and doing the technique correctly. Kushina startled, then held herself steady. Her heart pounded, embarrassment and nerves nearly overwhelming her. She almost moved away, but seeing his calm face with eyes closed, the impulse subsided. Makoto had said to hold steady. For the effect, this much effort was worth it. She urged herself on and focused. Ryo felt the brief stiffness and the rise in her body heat. Through the thin fabric, the contact point was warm. Her simple, clean scent wrapped around him and eased the last tightness from his thoughts. Kushina took a deep breath, forced down the pounding in her chest, and continued. A chance. Perfect timing. She reached out again, fingers trembling slightly, and placed them carefully at his temples. This time she did not hold back. Her fingertips pressed against warm skin with a measured, testing force and began to knead. Her movements were still a little clumsy, but her focus was much sharper than before. Her fingertips slid over the tense temporalis, adjusting pressure as she searched for the right points. Now and then a cool finger brushed his ear by accident. A few strands of her red hair tangled around her fingers and swayed with the motion. Each press made the muscle contours clearer under her touch. Each faint brush of hair seemed to speak quiet closeness. She could feel the strong pulse beneath her fingers and his steady, long breaths, one by one, like beats landing on her heartstrings. The tension beneath the quiet was more moving than any sound. Kushina's face burned bright. Each accidental touch made her breath go thin and nervous. In the room there was only Ryo's almost inaudible breathing and her own pounding heartbeat. Moonlight fell through the window, tracing a soft halo along Ryo's calm profile and outlining Kushina's focused, shy expression. The rare, warm stillness with its hint of innocence lasted a long time. Perhaps only a quarter hour. Then the door was yanked open with brute force. The rough motion slammed it into the frame with a crash like thunder. The air filled at once with the scent of battlefield smoke, bitter medicine, and harsh wind and dust. Along with it came a scorching gaze, full of restrained fury, pinning the room like a searchlight. Tsunade was back. She had been urgently recalled by Hiruzen earlier. Leaving the Hokage building with a stomach full of frustration, she learned that Hiruzen had not consulted her about the Nine Tails Jinchuriki transition. He said it was better for Mito to tell her granddaughter herself. He left only a vague instruction for Tsunade to clean up the mess caused by Ryo. Naturally, she assumed that was the entire reason she had been called back. With nowhere to vent, she headed straight for the Senju residence. Back home, she meant to ask Mito about Ryo in detail. But at this hour, Mito was already asleep, and Nawaki was out cold. Even so, Tsunade immediately caught a presence that was not family, one that was very familiar and made her angry, the culprit Ryo. Her expression shifted again when she sensed a second, familiar presence in the same room. At the doorway, Tsunade's blonde hair was a little mussed. Sweat beaded on her brow. Her eyes held both the fatigue of forced travel and the anger from being brushed off by Hiruzen. When her gaze cut through the drifting dust and landed on the scene inside, she saw her little Kushina in a short cotton nightgown, arms and calves pale under the moonlight. Her pupils tightened further at the sight of Kushina bowing her head with focused hands and a red face, her small palms working at Ryo's head. That was not the main point. The main point was that Ryo was resting comfortably while Kushina supported him. Moonlight traced the outline clearly. Kushina's face was red as a ripe tomato. The air froze for an instant. Kushina yelped like she had touched a hot iron. She snatched back her hands, pushed Ryo away in a panic, and sprang back. Her entire face went scarlet. She fumbled at her hem, trying to pull it down, and stammered, Tsunaden-ichan, I wasn't, I was just, massage, Makoto said, no. Her mind crashed. Ryo steadied himself with one hand on the floor. He sat up, no embarrassment at being caught, only slight irritation at being interrupted. He looked toward the doorway where a golden-haired figure radiated pressure. Tsunade leaned on the frame with arms folded. Her gaze paused for a beat on the spot where Ryo had been resting, then lifted like a blade to Kushina's flushed face. The anger from the Hokage building evaporated. In its place rose something sharp and dangerous, a mix of fury and the mood of someone catching trouble in the act. A slow, mischievous smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It made Kushina's heart stop. She drew out her words on purpose, her tone bright and teasing, each syllable landing like a hammer on Kushina's overloaded nerves. Hey, Kushina, little brat. Tsunade tipped her chin and deliberately let her eyes sweep over Kushina's flat stomach, her smile turning even more wicked. Her expression made it clear what she was implying. You are still so young. Her voice brimmed with pointed teasing. If you ended up pregnant. Tsunade stretched the last 3 words long, the tail rising with mean amusement, like throwing a huge bomb into the silent room. Then She spread her hands, as if to say even the sky could fall and it would not be her problem. Her eyes flicked lightly over Ryo's calm face, then dropped hard back on Kushina, who wanted to sink through the floor. She spoke each word slowly. Would not operate on you. The words lit a fuse. Kushina exploded, turning from a tomato into a shrieking steam engine, as if white steam really spouted from her head. Tsunaden-ichan, what are you saying? Idiot, big idiot. We did nothing. It was a massage. She stopped caring about anything else, clapped both hands over her burning face, and wailed with a thick fake crying tone. She barreled past Tsunade at the door. Tsunade stepped aside with interest. Kushina scrambled out, hands and feet both working. Her pounding footsteps boomed down the hall, mixed with muffled sobs of embarrassment and anger, each step like crushing what remained of her dignity. Moonlight lay cold across the guest room. Ryo stood up, composed as he straightened his slightly rumpled clothes, and adjusted his breathing. Tsunade leaned against the frame, arms folded, that dangerous, amused smile still on her lips. Her eyes said, kid, not bad, as she looked him up and down. Outside, Kushina's frantic running and choked cries faded at the end of the corridor. The night felt like it had only just begun. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 71. Sleep with me. Tsunade withdrew her gaze and looked at Ryo, who was still sitting cross-legged on the floor with that expression that clearly said, are you done making a scene yet? The trace of mischief she had shown when teasing Kushina vanished instantly. The anger she had been suppressing all the way back flared up again, burning so fiercely it made her lungs ache. She reached into her robe and pulled out a recall scroll, the same one that Danzo gave her. Pinching it between 2 fingers, she snapped her wrist and, smack, the scroll landed precisely in front of Ryo. It unfurled, revealing Hiruzen's unmistakable red seal. Impressive. You have really got some nerve now, huh? Tsunade folded her arms, stepped forward, and blocked the doorway completely. The killing intent rolling off her made the air in the room tense. Grinding her molars audibly, she glared daggers at him. Not only did you charm that little vixen Kushina until she is dizzy and dazed, you even had the guts to cause a mess this big. Her voice suddenly rose, carrying the rasp of exhaustion and the heat of her suppressed frustration. 2/3 of the village was covered by the blast. Tens of thousands knocked out cold. The medical corps is still packed to bursting. If the Anbu had not moved fast enough to clean things up, logistics would still be drowning in the aftermath. She took another step forward, the murderous aura honed on the AIM frontlines flooding the small room. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Do you even have a clue how much the cleanup is going to cost? We could sell you for parts and still not cover a fraction of it. Tsunade took a deep breath, as if imagining the horrifying sum, and her anger only grew hotter. Because of you, that old man sent me an emergency recall order like my life depended on it. Do you know what the front lines are like right now? Without me there, without my antidote formulas, people are dying by the dozen every day. And you little brat, were out here playing around. The more she spoke, the angrier she became. She could almost see all the funding, research budgets, and medical supplies that should have gone to saving lives on the front lines, now all pouring like a flood into this bottomless pit of a disaster. She, who should have been out there saving lives, was instead stuck here cleaning up after this brat. After listening to her tirade in silence, Ryo finally moved. He tilted his head slightly, just enough to dodge the flying droplets, then raised his eyes to meet Tsunade's furious glare, calm, steady, and unreadable. Are you done? He asked evenly, his tone completely devoid of panic or excuses. That only poured fuel on the fire. Tsunade felt the blood rush to her head. Ryo merely reached down with 2 fingers, lazily picked up the recall scroll from the floor, and glanced over it as if it were some unimportant scrap of paper. His tone carried the faintest edge of mockery. All this, just for that. He looked up and met her gaze. That old man called you back for this. Before she could answer, Ryo tossed the scroll aside again, as casually as if throwing away trash. That did it. Tsunade's temper detonated. Do not you dare change the subject. You are the one who made this mess. Who said you needed to clean up after me? Ryo interrupted, his tone steady but unyielding. Tsunade barked a laugh, her eye twitching with disbelief. Oh really? Look at you, talking big. You are just a snot-nosed brat. Even if we skinned and sold you, you could not pay off a fraction of the damage. What did you negotiate, huh? You think Hiruzen can be fooled by a few sweet words. In the end, he dumped the bill on me. Ryo looked at her, his silver-gray eyes as deep and cold as still water. When he spoke again, his words struck like a hammer. I made a deal with Hiruzen. Her tirade stopped cold. The contempt on her face faltered for a moment. Ryo continued, each word dropping like stones into still water. He called you back in a hurry. He paused, his eyes gleaming with knowing coldness, and it had nothing to do with me. What did you just say? Tsunade exploded, almost leaping in anger. Nothing to do with you. What else could it be for, then? But the doubt slipped in anyway. Her brows furrowed deeply, confusion and unease flickering in her eyes. Something was not right. That familiar, icy shiver ran down her spine, the same dread she had felt on the battlefield right before the second Hokage's chakra flickered out forever. Her face went pale. Blood seemed to rush up to her head and then drain all at once, leaving her cold and trembling. An unspeakable fear rose from the depths of her heart. Could it be, Grandma? No. Impossible. Mito's seal on the 9 tails had always been stable. Hiruzen would not, but if it was not about the family, about the village's very survival, and about her most precious relative's life and death, then why would he pull her from the front lines in the middle of a war? It could not have been about cleaning up Ryo's mess. That was a ridiculous excuse. Fragments of realization snapped together in her mind, forming a horrifying possibility. Hiruzen's vague, evasive tone. Ryo's calm, knowing demeanor, like someone who had already seen through everything. Tsunade swayed slightly, gripping the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. Hey, Ryo chuckled softly, almost mocking her moment of shock. He stood, tall and imposing in the dim light, giving her no chance to question further. Enough, he said flatly, voice leaving no room for argument as he strode toward the door. It is late. Go sleep. He stopped in front of her, leaning down slightly to look her in the eye. His cold, sharp face twisted into a teasing smirk. What is wrong, Tsunade? He drawled, eyes flicking over her pale, unsettled expression. You planning to stay and sleep with me? That one line snapped Tsunade out of her shock. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she gawked up at him. You brat. Who do you think you are talking to? Trying to hit on me. The shame and anger flared back to life. She pointed a trembling finger at his face, her temper rising again. Do you have any idea what happened to that idiot Jiraiya the last time he said something like that? He was drunk and ran his mouth, and I sent him flying out of the bathhouse and into the old crooked tree at the village gate. Hung there for 3 days. She huffed, clearly intending to scare him straight. I am not curious, Ryo cut her off coldly. He moved suddenly, stepping forward and shoulder-checking her aside without hesitation. The motion was abrupt and forceful. Tsunade stumbled back a half-step, caught off guard. Ryo's voice followed, calm but ringing with youthful defiance. I am still growing. He rested one hand on the doorframe, half-blocking the entrance, and added dryly. Some irresponsible person once said staying up too late would stunt my growth. He looked directly at her pale, furious, utterly conflicted expression, and drove the final nail in, one deliberate word at a time. Do not stay up late. Her mind blanked. Memories flooded back, that night long ago, when she had tossed him the Cage Bunshin scroll and scolded him for his late-night training. Kid, go get a proper night's sleep. Keep staying up like this, you will stunt your growth. Ha! When you are grown and still shorter than Kushina, we will see how your fragile pride takes it. I am doing you a favor, you know. Her own teasing words echoed vividly in her ears. Now, they had come back to bite her hard. Ryo glanced at her mortified, color-shifting face, pale 1 second, red the next, and his lips twitched ever so slightly. Now get out of here, he said, tone final. You are in the way of my training. With that, he slammed the door shut with a bang so hard the frame shuddered and dust fell from the ceiling. Quote ? Quote. Tsunade barely dodged in time, almost getting her nose flattened. You brat. Open the damn door, she shouted, furious, kicking it hard enough to shake the walls, but the chakra-reinforced door did not budge. Inside, silence. Only moonlight answered her through the window. She smacked the door a few more times until her palms stung, then stopped, realizing it was pointless. Her grandmother was asleep, and Naoki would wake up if she kept yelling. She could only grind her teeth, curse under her breath, and storm off down the corridor, her footsteps heavy and echoing against the stone floor. The house fell silent again. Inside the room, Ryo leaned against the cold door for a few moments, listening until her footsteps faded away. Then he turned back, sat down on his bedding, and exhaled slowly. His silver-gray eyes reflected the moonlight, calm and deep. He closed them again, sinking into meditation. His vast chakra surged through his body like a silver current. In his mind, the intricate patterns of spacetime jutsu unfolded, lines of chakra flow, formulae, and seals continuously being formed, broken, and reconstructed. A Cage Bunshin silently dissolved beside him, reforming anew. To be continued. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 72. The Pillar of Konoha for an Era is finally shedding its burden. Bonus. Morning light struggled to pierce the gloom hanging over Konoha's sky. In the Senju residence, the dining room held the warmth of breakfast, and a faint, lingering heaviness. Naoki took a vicious bite out of his rice ball, but his eyes stayed locked on Ryo across the table, who was calmly sipping soup. That stare looked like it could burn 2 holes straight through his face. The memory of his thigh being blown apart seemed to ache again deep in the bone, despite it already being the 3rd time it had rapidly healed. Sis. Naoki slapped his spoon down with a sharp clack, having found his outlet. His voice carried grievance and accusation. You have to do something about Ryo. He is a walking hazard. Look at what he did to me. Combat drill. He went for the kill on purpose. My leg was practically roasted. 3 times. 3 whole times. He raised his voice on purpose and shot Ryo a provocative look. The message could not be clearer. My backer is home, just you wait. Tsunade, seated at the head, was sipping miso soup. At his words, she did not even lift an eyelid. Instead, she rolled her eyes so hard they nearly flipped to the ceiling. Eat. And stop whining, she rasped, hoarse with a hangover and impatience. She tapped the rim of her bowl with her spoon. You think I am blind? With your so-called skill, you cannot even cast a proper water dragon bullet. You rush in with fake outs full of openings like a rabid dog. Getting your leg blown off is your own damn fault. Ryo is doing you a favor, so you do not step onto a real battlefield and leave nothing but scraps for us to collect. She shut him down without mercy, not even sparing him a glance, much less the conspiratorial look he was begging for, hoping she would help him teach Ryo a lesson. Naoki's mouth opened and closed like a punctured balloon, all his bluster deflating at once. He was left with nothing but stifled humiliation and the sting of his sister's ruthless truth. Head down, he shoveled rice into his mouth with tragic vigor. Is this really my big sister? Was I picked up out of a trash can? Beside the head seat, Uzumaki Mito had been quietly watching the lively morning unfold. Sunlight filtered through the window, laying gentle shadows across her time-worn face. She watched her noisy grandchildren, and the silent, straight-backed redhead. Beside him, little Kushina's face was flushed as she kept sneaking glances his way. Mito's lips curved with a tender, seasoned smile. Breakfast ended beneath that delicate mood. Naoki was still sulking. When everything was tidied, they gathered around the low table in the sitting room. Tsunade, sharp as ever, noticed Mito was different today, not the usual relaxed warmth of an early morning. There was a solemnity to her that felt like the quiet before final instructions. Uzumaki Mito sat up a little straighter. Her eyes, calm and all-seeing, swept over the gathered children. Naoki, stubbornly holding back his disappointment. Tsunade, feigning composure while her knuckles blanched. Kushina, nestled close to Ryo, ignorant in her youth but starting to feel unease. Her gaze paused on Ryo's calm face, then lifted to meet Tsunade's searching, faintly fearful eyes. Children, Mito said. Her voice was not loud, but it settled over every stray sound in the room, grounded and resolute. I have decided to transfer the 9 tails. Transferring the 9 tails meant the Jinchuriki would die. Silence. Even the birds outside seemed frozen mid-song. The sitting room felt sheathed in invisible ice. They had expected it. But when Mito said it herself, Tsunade felt all the blood drain from her body. Her heart clenched, caught in a cold, iron grip that made breathing hurt. She clenched her fists, forcing down the sting burning behind her eyes. Do not cry. You are the elder sister. Naoki and Kushina are watching. You have to hold it together. Awa, Grandma. No. I do not want you to go. Kushina's tears burst like a broken dam. She flung herself at Mito, clinging to her as if to life itself, her small body shaking violently. I will be good. I will study sealing. I will never sneak out again. Please do not leave me. I am scared. Hot tears soaked through Mito's dark clothes in an instant. Mito's thin but steady hands patted the trembling little back, soothing her like an infant. Her voice was gentle, helpless. Silly child. Grandma is far too old. See, that 9 tails has been in me a long time, its temper has gotten bigger, and I can barely hold it down now. Let it move into your new home, It is roomier there. You will have to manage it well for me. She brushed Kushina's wet cheeks with the pad of her thumb, the warmth tinged with aching reluctance. Besides, your grandfather Hashirama, that old rascal, must be so bored alone in the Pure Land. If I do not go keep an eye on him, who knows what ruckus he will stir up next. Grandma has to go make sure he behaves, do you not think? The tone was coaxing, but the parting it carried was irreversible. Kushina only cried harder, tears dropping like beads from a broken string. She buried her face in Mito's chest, sobbing too hard to form full sentences. Over Kushina's quivering red hair, Mito looked to Ryo, the boy who had personally ended the Kumo spy, protected her precious granddaughter, and shown Konoha both his breadth of heart and monstrous potential. Ryo, she called, the weight of entrustment in her voice. Ryo stood without a word and moved the teacup aside. His face was as unreadable as ever, but his eyes were more focused than usual. With a gravity that belied her frail hands, Mito gently took Kushina's small, sweaty, tear-damp fingers, then firmly, without leaving room for refusal, placed them into Ryo's broad, steady palm. 2 hands overlapped, strength and fragility meeting in one point. Mito lifted her gaze, looking deep into Ryo's silver-gray eyes. There was no doubt there, only the most earnest plea and trust. Promise Grandma Mito that you will take good care of our little Kushina. Guard her for a lifetime. Watch over her, keep her safe and happy as she grows up. Will you? The cold tremor in his palm made Ryo's heart tighten, just slightly. He glanced down at Kushina, crying so hard she could barely breathe, then met Mito's eyes again. His lips parted. No hesitation. Each word fell like hammered iron, heavy and clear. I promise. No flowery vow. Just 2 words. From his mouth, they weighed 1,000 pounds. Every wrinkle on Mito's face seemed to ease at once, relief blooming quiet and deep. She patted the back of Ryo's hand, then let go. Her eyes moved to Naoki. He sat like a puppet with its strings cut, head down, shoulders trembling as he tried to swallow his sobs. Her reckless, pure-hearted grandson, whom she had watched grow up. Naoki, Mito's voice brimmed with love, and a tinge of complication. You are the one Grandma worries about most. Her words pricked him like a needle. Naoki's head snapped up. His eyes were scarlet at the rims, tear tracks not yet dry. Mito looked into those eyes so like Tobarama's and sighed. Those 3 broken legs were arranged by Grandma. What? Naoki froze. The grief on his face solidified into shock as he stared at her. I had Ryo do it, to make you remember, in the most painful way, that the battlefield is not a game. It is not a place where you charge and shouting will of fire and come out covered in glory. It is a place of blood and death. Mito's tone sharpened, the final lecture of an elder pressed for time. I do not expect you to plan like your sensei Orochimaru. But at least use your head enough to protect yourself. Recklessness is just another word for dying. I am afraid you will end up like your granduncle, losing your life on some nameless patch of ground, for nothing. Her voice caught for an instant, sinking into an old, unhealed ache. Naoki looked like he had been struck by lightning. The blankness and confusion on his face were drowned by a flood of shame and regret. So those shattered bones were not Ryo's cruelty, but Grandma's heavy love and worry. He had been a fool, reckless and impulsive, nearly trampling her painstaking care. He scrubbed a hand hard across his face. When he looked up again, his eyes still swam with tears, but now there was a steadiness there he had never had before. He met Mito's gaze and spoke, one word at a time. Grandma, I was wrong. I will change. I will use my head. I will protect myself. I will come back safe. Mito smiled and nodded, ruffling his stiff, short hair. At last, her eyes returned to Tsunade. The proudest granddaughter of the first Hokage. Konoha's healer saint. She sat ramrod straight, jaw clenched, lips pressed into a stubborn line, fighting to keep the tears from spilling. But the faint tremble of her shoulders betrayed the storm inside. Tsunade, Mito softened her voice to a caress, filled with reluctance and apology. Do not mind Grandma nagging. My temper has always been too quick, I never managed to teach you how to tame that firecracker temper of yours. I worry that there will be no one left to help you rein it in. Tsunade bit her lower lip hard. A heavy sourness surged up her nose. She blinked rapidly, forcing the dampness back. How I wish I could stay with you a few more years, Mito murmured, voice soaked with affection. To see you wear white and marry with splendor, to see you find someone who truly cherishes you, accepts your temper, and protects you, but Grandma does not have the blessing. I will not be there to see it. Grandma. Tsunade finally could not hold it anymore. Her voice cracked as she cut in, terrified that another word would shatter her. I will not marry. I just want to stay with you forever. Like when I was little. She straightened her back with effort, but the reddening corners of her eyes and the tremor in her voice gave her away. Mito looked at her brave front and smiled, like a mother indulging a willful child. Silly girl. The time that followed felt like they had forgotten the coming farewell. Like any ordinary family, they sat together. Mito spoke slowly, telling stories of Kushina as a toddler. Of the time Naoki first refined chakra and flipped over from excitement. Of Tsunade's first wall shattered by monstrous strength, and the guilty, secretly proud face she had made after. Naoki chimed in with red-rimmed eyes, trying to keep things lively. Kushina leaned against Mito, sometimes giggling through hiccups, mostly clutching her hand as if never to let go. Tsunade listened quietly, a tender smile at her lips, gaze never leaving Mito's face, memorizing every expression. Only where no one could see did her clenched knuckles betray the torment inside. Ryo sat beside Kushina in silence, listening to the tapestry of memories and goodbyes, like a steadfast shadow. Sunlight shifted across the wooden floor through the lattice window. The tea was refilled several times. The pastries had long gone cold. When the sunlight finally crept to the edge of the low table, Mito gently patted Kushina's shoulder where it rested against her. No matter how long, every farewell must be said. There were no more reminders left to give. Mito simply looked around one last time. Her warm gaze lingered on each young face, Naoki's forced strength, Tsunade's hidden grief, Kushina's swollen, clinging eyes. At last, she smiled and rose. In the Senju sitting room, a long, voiceless quiet settled. In the slanting sun, fine dust hung motionless in the air, as if time itself had stilled, sealing this thick, unyielding sorrow of parting within the space called home, pressing heavy on every heart. The pillar of Konoha for an era was, at last, laying down her burden. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 73. The Nine Tails Transfer Ritual. The main hall of the Senju ancestral home was like an ancient well sunk into an abyss. The air was so still it felt as though it might crush the moonlight. Mito's hoarse murmurs of comfort and Kushina's muffled sobs were the only living struggle within that dead silence. The old woman's wrinkled hand stroked that blazing red hair again and again, endless tenderness smoothing the girl's grief in this moment before farewell. Kushina, do not be afraid. The elder's voice was aged yet vast as the sea, unable to banish the chill of night. Grandma will watch over you from the sky, eyes open, watching you grow up, watching you live your life. Do not go. Grandma, do not go. I cannot let you go. Kushina buried her whole face in the warmth of Mito's robe. Her sobs broke apart against the fabric, her small body shaking so hard it hurt to see. Her swollen eyes were like breached springs, tears rolling and staining the cloth a darker despair. Every ragged breath hitched with a tearing, helpless sound, the sound of a child thrown against the flood of fate. Mito's clouded eyes drifted to the moon, veiled and revealed by torn clouds. At last, with immeasurable reluctance, she gently pushed the burning bundle of tears from her arms. Her thin fingers brushed the girl's wet, tear-streaked cheeks, soft but steady. Do not fear becoming a Jinchuriki. Your heart will often feel empty, but there is always something that can fill it. Her gaze slipped, almost casually yet knowingly, toward the shadowed courtyard, where a red-haired figure stood like a stake driven into the earth. Is that hollow in your heart not already filled? Kushina's sobbing cut off, as if a hand had closed around her throat. Something hot slammed into her chest. That moonlit declaration, and now, the silent, steadfast back she could sense even through the door, both exploded in her mind. That overbearing warmth that allowed no refusal was the only light she could cling to in this vast, falling dark, the last thread holding up her crumbling heart. Outside the hall, Tsunade paced like a caged beast, boots crusted with the front line's blood and dust grinding dead leaves under heel with sharp, bone-like snaps. Rage quivered at every pore, near detonation. Damn that old monkey. Her growl was followed by a dull thunk as her kunai sank deep into a pine trunk, wood chips flying. Ripped from the front to attend a ritual she could not change and that split her heart, her fury was a living thing. In a corner of the courtyard, Hiruzen and his advisors Mitokado Homura and Udatane Kaharu stood like three cold statues. The air was drawn tight as a bowstring, every breath dragged through thorns. Then the thick shoji slid open. Mito stepped out, leading Kushina by the hand. The elder kept her back as straight as she could, but the mountain-heavy dusk of age and exhaustion could not be hidden. Kushina's hand was locked within her grandmother's, old but unyielding, as they walked, step by step, toward the ceiling dais. Moonlight flowed like water across the deep-carved, ancient fuinjutsu lines in the stone. Those lines seemed alive as they coiled and writhed, exuding a chill that froze even the air. A thick stone post rose at each corner of the platform. Mito sat. Hiruzen, Homura, and Kaharu took their places as well, each face ironhard and grave. Come up, child. Mito's voice was calm, as still as a bottomless pond. Kushina drew a deep breath. The cold air, mud and rot of fallen leaves, filled her lungs in a fine sting. She shoved down the last bit of dependence in her eyes and replaced it with something like tragic resolve. She released Mito's hand and stepped alone into the center of that cold stone, an altar that meant power and prison. Her gaze swept the shadows of the courtyard and locked onto Ryo, standing by the wall with his arms crossed. Through the density of night, his silver-gray eyes met hers with perfect clarity, calm and steady, like the surest mooring point driven into the churning sea of her heart. She clenched her fists tight. Mito's 10 withered fingers suddenly began to weave signs, so fast they blurred into a gray haze. Begin. Her bark cracked like thunder. The three advisors dared not slacken for an instant. Chakra flared blindingly in their hands. But when their refined chakra poured into the etched edges of the platform, it only formed a glowing framework. The true core, the tidal surge, vast and ancient, carrying the blood-deep power of the Uzumaki, rose from Mito herself. Her last reserves, the bedrock of the ritual. Womb. Every seal line on the platform lit at once, crimson as blood. A colossal scarlet barrier whirled up like a vortex, enveloping the platform and the slim red figure at its center. Across the barrier wall, dense tadpole-like seal script raced and writhed, weaving a net meant to bind gods and demons. Roar. A howl of primeval fury and unending humiliation hammered straight through the scarlet dome, slamming into the soul of every witness. The beams and pillars of the Senju home shivered. Civilians across the sleeping village jolted awake, hearts pounding in terror at that sound from the depths. A heartbeat later, hell itself descended on Kushina. The Ninetails chakra, ominous, icy, and hot enough to burn the world, flooded into her like molten rock, rending meridians and pouring through a too young body. It was not the pain of broken bone. It was the skin, the flesh, every nerve screaming at once, an agony that defied language. Her pale skin flushed crimson, like iron thrown into a forge. Fine blisters rose in a rush across her exposed neck and arms, swelling tight. Ah! She threw back her head and screamed, the sound cracking and tearing. Her body arched, every muscle locked, as if an invisible fire scorched her again and again. Her throat seized under the pain. Only ragged, bellows-like gasps scraped out. Sweat, mixed with a thin seep of fluids from beneath the skin, soaked her clothes. No blood, yet crueler than bleeding. Above, the scarlet barrier keened at a pitch that stabbed the ear. It warped, bloated, bearing the cataclysm within. Hold the ceiling formation. Star-like brilliance erupted in Mito's eyes. Her hands blurred past their limits, a storm of signs. Power poured from her until even her frail body trembled out of control. Hiruzen, Homura, and Kaharu clenched their teeth so hard it sounded like steel grinding. Veins roped their temples. Their faces blanched paper pale as they fought to keep the outer frame steady, only the edges. Against the Ninetales' true fury, the brunt fell entirely upon Uzumaki Mito's shoulders. Kushina. Unleash your Uzumaki blood, now. Lock it down. Mito's shout was a war drum across time, rattling souls, edged with a Doherty resolve. A different power surged forth, tough, pure, ancient, like a sleeping dragon waking within Kushina's breaking body. The purest Uzumaki lineage boiled. Across her flushed skin, dark gold seal formulae, old as ages, lit along the paths of burning pain, racing and entwining until they shone with dazzling light. At her lower abdomen, centered at the navel, a precise, impossibly intricate 8 trigrams seal flared into view, radiating unshakable stability. That newborn strength resonated with Mito's final sealing force, becoming countless cold, iron-strong spiritual chains of dark gold. With the momentum to suppress all things, they snapped taut. And, along the path of the scarlet torrent, they bit back against its source, driving straight toward the fox within Mito, the beast that sought to break free and devour its host. Thud. Crack. The great scarlet barrier imploded to a pinprick, then burst outward in a ring of invisible, annihilating ripples. In that instant, Mito's last glance held, unyielding, gentle, bright as ever. The light in her eyes faded like quiet stardust, full of blessing, trust, and a charge for the village's future, as she slipped away without a sound. All her life, all her strength, and her everlasting longing for Senju Hashirama flowed into those Uzumaki chains, their warmth wrapping Kushina's raging seal. Hashirama, I am coming to meet you now. To be continued. Chapter 74, the second generation of the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. The final wisp of the Ninetales' wild crimson chakra sank completely into Kushina's body. The 8 trigram seal etched upon her abdomen flashed violently, then dimmed. The golden light folded inward, settling deep beneath her skin until only a faint, intricate sealing mark remained, small but brimming with immense power. On the stone dais, that terrifying scarlet radiance flickered out like a dying wildfire, vanishing into silence. Deathly stillness followed. Only the ragged, shallow breaths of a small figure at the center of the altar broke the quiet, mingling with the faint, acrid scent of burned flesh. Hiruzen was gasping for breath, utterly spent. Kaharu's face had gone pale as paper, and Homura's trembling hands could no longer be stilled. The shinobi standing guard nearby instinctively took half a step back, horror widening their eyes. Kushina stood at the heart of the altar, her small frame covered in scorched wounds, head bowed, her skin still faintly glowing with dark golden lines that slowly faded beneath her flesh. Sweat soaked every strand of her vivid red hair, clinging to her tattered clothes. She stood motionless upon the still warm stone, bathed in the afterglow of the ritual. Against the far wall, Ryo hadn't moved an inch. No one noticed that his left hand had never released the cold hilt of the Kusanagi sword. Within the vast expanse of her inner world, Kushina's soul floated above a boundless sea of thought. Below her, the colossal nine-tailed fox thrashed and roared, its fury shaking the void. Damn it! You dare! Its roar was cut short. From the emptiness above, countless chains of dark gold burst forth, radiating cold will and absolute dominance. They snapped around the beast's throat with brutal precision. Thicker, heavier chains followed, binding its limbs and 9 ferocious tails until its mountain-sized body was forced into a humiliating, suspended stillness. Shut up, you stupid fox. Kushina's voice was cold and level, echoing through the sealed space like a decree. Her will suffused the realm, silencing every trace of the fox's rage. Only the grinding of the chains and the creature's muffled growls remained, low, venomous, but utterly powerless. Back in the courtyard of the Senju estate. The suffocating air of violence gradually dispersed. Ryo stepped forward toward the altar and extended his arms in silence. Kushina lifted her head. Her small face, blurred by sweat, tears, and pain, tilted upward. Her willpower, stretched to the breaking point, gave way. Exhaustion and fear flooded through her body all at once. Her knees buckled. She fell backward, only to be caught firmly in Ryo's embrace. Ryo, her voice was faint, like the last flicker of a dying candle. Now I'm just a monster, aren't I? Tears welled again, spilling over the streaks that had only just dried. Will you not want me anymore? She remembered the villagers' whispers, the fearful eyes behind her nickname Red-Hot Habanero. Now that the source of calamity itself was sealed inside her, the title monster had become undeniable. That truth pierced deeper than any physical pain. Ryo's arms tightened around her, as though he could fuse her trembling body into his own. He bent close, his breath hot against her ear. Have you forgotten? What did they call me? I'm a monster too. His tone hardened. We were born for each other. The declaration struck like thunder, shattering the ice of fear in Kushina's heart. All the agony, panic, and exhaustion of the night surged out of her in a wave, and she finally collapsed, sinking into darkness. Sleep, Ryo murmured, his voice softening to a whisper. He brushed the sweat and tears from her face with his sleeve, awkward but gentle, smoothing her tangled red hair with tender care. Kamiyama Ryo. Homura stepped forward, his face like stone, eyes sharp as blades. Release the Jinchuriki immediately. She's in an extremely unstable state and requires maximum isolation and protection. She is the village's core secret, its greatest asset. You. Kaharu cut in sharply, he's right. If you provoke the Nine Tails again, the consequences will be catastrophic. Step back at once. Ryo didn't move. Still cradling Kushina, he slowly turned his gaze toward the two advisors. Their eyes met. Boom. An invisible explosion of killing intent tore through the courtyard, cold, suffocating, and absolute. It wasn't chakra. It was pure will. A warning. The two advisors froze mid-sentence, their throats constricted by invisible hands. Their faces drained of color, pupils contracting to pinpoints. Tremors racked their bodies as icy dread crawled up their spines. Cold sweat beaded across their foreheads. They understood perfectly. That gaze carried an unmistakable message. Say one more word, and face the consequences. Tsunade's heart seized. Damn it. She knew Ryo too well, a man who followed only his own heart, heedless of authority or consequence. She darted between him and the advisors, arms spread wide, her tone sharp with urgency. Ryo. Calm down. Hiruzen, still pale from the strain of the ceremony, finally found his voice. He stepped forward, his tone firm with the authority of a Hokage. Enough. His gaze swept over the trembling advisors. Homura. Kaharu. You've both been awake all night. Emotions are running high. The ceiling is complete, Kushina's stability is our top priority. Return and rest, both of you. His words carried the weight of command. Then his eyes turned to Ryo, still stern, but softer now. Ryo. Take care of Kushina. The crushing pressure that filled the courtyard dissipated as if it had never been. Ryo's attention returned to the girl sleeping in his arms. The murderous aura vanished without a trace, leaving only calm, unwavering devotion. Only the soft rustle of leaves and the sound of steady breathing remained. 3 days later, the funeral of Uzumaki Mito was held in quiet solemnity at the memorial stone deep within Konoha's forest. The sky hung low and gray. Though no rain fell, the air was heavy with the damp chill of an unspoken sorrow. The scent of wet earth lingered thick in the air. No grand ceremony. No crowds. Only a handful of mourners stood among the trees. Tsunade, Nawaki, Hiruzen, Homura, Kaharu, and Ryo, silent and steadfast at the side of a cloaked Kushina. Before a simple wooden monument carved with the deceased's name, Kushina's red-rimmed eyes brimmed with grief. Yet beneath the sorrow, something deeper had taken root, a quiet, unyielding strength. Teardrops slid down Tsunade's cheeks unnoticed as she looked at the grave. Her voice was low, hoarse. Grandmother. She paused, then turned to Kushina with a weary smile touched by bitter understanding. Grandmother Mito used to say that meeting my grandfather was the greatest blessing of her life. Now. Tsunade's lips curved into a sad, knowing arc. Maybe I finally understand what she meant. Kushina's head snapped up, eyes burning red once more. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, she bowed deeply, a silent gesture carrying all the emotion words could never hold. Her hand drifted to her abdomen, where faint heat still lingered, the place that now sealed a power capable of both destroying and protecting Konoha. Grandma Mito, she thought, you can finally rest. The burden you carried your whole life is now mine to bear. The cold morning breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it a gentle drizzle, as if the heavens themselves wept for the passing of a great kunoichi. The era of Konoha's first nine-tailed Jinchuriki had ended. And the era of the second, Uzumaki Kushina, had begun. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 75. Flying Thunder God Mark. Konoha Village, Hokage's office. The heavy, dark red curtains shut out the harsh sunlight. The air inside was thick with cheap tobacco smoke and the silent scent of gunpowder. Hiruzen stood with his back to his desk. The brush in his hand hovered over an urgent battle report from the Suna frontlines. A drop of black ink fell silently onto the parchment, spreading like a small, ominous shadow. Homura's voice nearly sprayed the back of Hiruzen's neck. Did you see what that Kamiyama Ryo did? He dared to show killing intent right in front of you. He wanted to kill us, plain and simple. Today it is the advisors, tomorrow it could be you. Someone that dangerous and unstable must be contained, watched closely. Outrageous. The gall of that upstart, threatening him, an elder of Konoha. Did he still have the village in his eyes? Did he respect authority at all? If this was tolerated, what would stop other shinobi from following suit? Such defiance must be crushed, immediately. Kaharu's thin, sharp face twisted as she chimed in, her voice as shrill as a knife scraping bone. He is absolutely right. And that is not even the worst of it. We are talking about the Jinchuriki, the village's ultimate weapon, its greatest treasure. She is not Ryo's girlfriend. He must be kept far away from Uzumaki Kushina. If he manipulates her emotions, it could end in disaster. And you, Hiruzen, you know exactly how dangerous it is when a Jinchuriki gives birth and the seal weakens. Hiruzen slowly turned around. His graying beard trembled slightly as his weary yet razor-sharp eyes swept across the two faces before him, faces painted with false righteousness but shadowed by fear of losing power. He slapped the battle report flat onto the desk with a sharp thud. Enough, Homura. Kaharu. His voice was not loud, but it carried the iron weight of Hokage authority. Kushina and Ryo are both pillars of Konoha, Tsunade's disciples, and my students'. I trust their character completely. Just as I trust you both to maintain Konoha's stability when I eventually step down. He paused deliberately, watching their expressions sour. Ryo's will to protect the Jinchuriki is steadfast. That is exactly the bond Mito-sama and I hope to see. As for the rest, his tone hardened, I have not gone senile yet. Do your jobs. That is the best support you can give me. Understood. The warning in his words struck deep. Both advisors went pale, as if someone had clamped invisible hands around their throats. The phrase when I step down hit them like a bucket of cold water, dousing the faint flames of ambition smoldering in their hearts. Their lips twitched, desperate to retort. Out. Hiruzen's roar cut through the tension. He slammed his pipe against the desk, the dull thud echoing like a gunshot. The two advisors flinched as if struck, glaring resentfully at the pile of paperwork, the symbol of absolute power, before turning on their heels and leaving the room in silence. The heavy wooden doors closed behind them, shutting out both the noise of the world and the whisper of political schemes. Hiruzen let out a long, tired sigh, rubbing his throbbing temples. The aftereffects of the Nine Tails transfer had not yet faded, the frontlines were strained, and the village was riddled with petty troubles. He leaned back in his chair and lit his pipe once more. White smoke curled upward as his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Ryo, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Orochimaru. All powerful, all loyal, for now. As long as their strength stayed aligned with his, as long as they did not threaten the authority of the Hokage, they could live and act as freely as they wished. After all, which great shinobi was not a bit unruly? Even his 3 students had their vices, gambling, debauchery, rebellion. And as for Homura and Kaharu, he chuckled quietly. 2 old relics clutching to power, they were just reacting to the new generation's rise. Still chuckling, he reached for the crystal ball on his desk. After all that hard work, a little entertainment would not hurt. Senju Estate, Ryo's room. The afternoon sun streamed warmly through the paper doors, casting soft golden stripes across the tatami. The air was still. Only the faint scratch of a brush against skin and Kushina's stifled, ticklish gasps broke the silence. Ryo sat cross-legged behind her, his long, steady fingers glowing faintly with concentrated chakra. With delicate precision, he was inscribing a minuscule but intricate Hiraishin no Jutsu formula along the side of her smooth, pale abdomen, close enough to her Jinchuriki seal to link with it, yet far enough not to disturb it. The completed design resembled a small, round tomato. Its scarlet hue was not ink, it was pure chakra light, softly pulsing against her warm skin like a living mark. Ah, Ryo, are you done yet? That tickles. Kushina squirmed slightly, the tips of her red hair brushing against his arm. Her cheeks glowed pink, caught somewhere between shyness and sweetness. Since becoming the Jinchuriki, her senses had sharpened immensely. She could even detect the faint chakra of the hidden Anbu watching from beyond the walls, those who claimed to protect her, but in truth only monitored her every move. That invisible cage of surveillance weighed heavily on her heart. Do not move, Ryo murmured, voice low but gentle. His hand remained steady as stone. Almost finished. He watched the forming seal intently, adjusting the chakra output with microscopic control. I know about the Anbu. Kushina stiffened slightly, then slumped, deflated like a pufferfish. They are always there, like flies, she muttered sullenly, her voice small and bristling with frustration. So annoying. They will not even let me leave the village. Always saying they are afraid I will lose control, HMPH. Done. Ryo's tone was calm but certain. The final rune clicked perfectly into place. The tiny chakra tomato glowed once, then dimmed, fusing seamlessly into her skin, like a natural birthmark. Ryo exhaled softly, drawing back his hand, the warmth of her skin still lingering at his fingertips. It is complete. After days of relentless training, burning through shadow clones and guided by Kushina's own deep knowledge of sealing, he had finally grasped the basics of the Hiraishin no Jutsu, and S-rank space-time ninjutsu. His foundation was still shallow, far from the effortless mastery of the future fourth Hokage, but the core function, long-distance teleportation, was finally stable. The key to survival and rescue was now within reach. He looked up, meeting Kushina's bright blue eyes. There was a new depth to them since the sealing ritual, traces of the Nine Tails crimson glint mingled with the unyielding strength of her Uzumaki blood. Hiraishin, she repeated, eyes wide with wonder as she touched the mark. The surface was cool and smooth, leaving no trace of discomfort. That is the one, right? The super cool technique that lets you whoosh across space instantly. Her eyes sparkled, then dimmed a little. But even if you can do that, it is not like they will ever let me leave the village. She pouted, looking heartbreakingly dejected. Ryo reached out, resting a broad, calloused hand atop her soft crimson hair, ruffling it gently, awkwardly, but full of quiet affection. A faint breeze stirred the room. Kushina blinked. For a moment, Ryo vanished from sight, and before she could gasp, warmth bloomed behind her. His arm slipped naturally around her waist from behind, his chin brushing the curve of her neck. Do not worry. The mark is set. Once I am strong enough to crush every obstacle, I will take you anywhere you want to go. The instant his words faded, his body flickered again, gone and back in the same heartbeat, as though he had never moved at all. The speed was breathtaking. Even a shadow clone could not react that fast. Wow. Kushina clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide in disbelief before bursting into pure delight. Then she threw herself forward, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist, pressing her cheek against his chest with a fierce little smile. I believe you. We will travel the whole ninja world together. The gloom that had clouded her heart for days melted away, replaced by dazzling excitement and hope. To be continued. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 76. What's wrong with enjoying myself bonus. The heavy curtains of the Hokage's office shut out every ray of sunlight. The air was so thick with the stench of cheap tobacco and mildewed paperwork that it could almost be cut with a knife. Hiruzen was rewarding his own, diligent service to Konoha, by staring so hard into his crystal ball that his eyes seemed welded to it. His face was flushed, drool glistened at the corner of his mouth. The mighty third Hokage looked less like a leader and more like a senile old pervert. Hokage-sama. At the voice, Hiruzen jerked upright, snatching the crystal ball out of sight, his expression snapping into feigned composure. A masked Anbu emerged soundlessly from the shadowed corner, dropping to one knee. Beneath the tanuki-patterned mask, his voice was flat and emotionless. Danzo-sama has sent a second encrypted dispatch from the AIM front. He set a wax-sealed root scroll on the desk. Contents. When will Tsunade return? Soon as counterattack is intensifying. The medical corps is gravely undermanned. The moment Hiruzen heard Danzo's message, the brief ease in his brow vanished, knotting tight again. The messenger from Danzo-sama has already requested an audience 3 times, the Anbu continued evenly. Additionally, we have confirmed Tsunade-sama's current location, she is at the gambling house by the village gates. A pause. Eyewitnesses report she is losing heavily. Bang. Hiruzen's fist crashed down on the desk. Ink splattered from the jar, spattering the casualty list from the Suna front like fresh blood. Damn it. Does she think the Hokage's office is her personal bank? Shinobi are bleeding out on the front lines, and she's wasting her days at the dice table. The Anbu stiffened imperceptibly. Hiruzen took several sharp breaths, forcing his blood pressure back down. He had recalled her to the village to let her see Mito one last time, to stabilize the Jinchuriki transfer, to be the failsafe in case something went wrong. With Kushina's seal only days old, the Nine Tails was like a live explosive tag with the pin half pulled. Keeping Tsunade nearby was pure insurance. But that reckless girl, she really thought this was vacation time. Meanwhile, Danzo was at the aim front sticking his neck out, demanding medics, 3 messages in a single day, and she was gambling. Hiruzen raked both hands through his thinning hair in exasperation. He had dumped all his biggest headaches, Kushina, Ryo, and even Uchiha Makoto, onto Tsunade's newly formed 8th squad. It was partly necessity, partly a petty bit of payback to watch his strong-willed student squirm under the weight. And now, she had simply vanished into leisure. Go, he barked through clenched teeth, jabbing a finger at the Anbu. Drag that reckless brat here, now. The gambling house, Lucky Cat Pavilion. The gold-painted sign gleamed above the reek of sweat, liquor, cheap perfume, and half-spoiled food. Dice clattered, coins rang, voices rose in cheers and curses, a roaring chaos of greed. In the VIP corner, Tsunade had one foot propped on a stool, her crimson gamble cloak hanging open to reveal a tight scarlet bustier beneath. The small mountain of chips before her was collapsing in an avalanche of defeat. 2 points, small, the dealer intoned, face blank. Damn it. Tsunade slammed the table, sending chips scattering. Without even looking, she slapped her last 2 gold coins onto Big. Again. I refuse to believe my luck is that rotten. The oily-faced pit boss sidled up, rubbing his hands together, wearing a servile smile that could not hide his calculating eyes. Tsunade-sama, perhaps you should rest a bit. About that loan from last time. Quit yapping, she snapped, her glare sharp enough to cut steel. I am about to win it all back. Roll. The pit boss flinched, swallowing whatever he had meant to say about her previous debts. No one with half a brain argued with this woman. And with that generous fool Jiraiya always footing the bill, why risk his life? Better to treat it as buying peace of mind. Half an hour later, the last 50 Ryo chip was swept away by the dealer's bamboo rake. The table before Tsunade gleamed empty. Rotten luck. She surged to her feet, knocking over the stool behind her. Her golden hair, tangled from hours of frustration, flared as she clawed through it. Her eyes, red-rimmed from fatigue and anger, burned like a cornered lioness's. The pit boss appeared again like a ghost, holding out a thin scroll sealed with a tiny Uchiha fan emblem. His voice was all caution. Tsunade-sama, this came from the Hokage's office earlier, about your 8th squad's task assignment and team confirmation. Already seething, Tsunade snatched the scroll, crumpled it into a ball, and shoved it into her bulging, and completely empty, coin purse. Got it. Now get lost. She kicked aside a chair, shouldered past the gawking gamblers, and stormed out of the hall, the floor trembling under her boots. Her head pounded with a single thought. Win it back. Find somewhere to win it all back. Damn that stingy old man, takes forever to approve funding. And those stupid team rosters, what did they have to do with me anyway? Senju compound, late afternoon. The courtyard basked in the lazy orange glow of sunset. Nawaki lay sprawled under the veranda. He had just been dragged out by Ryo for chakra control training. His best attempt at water bullet had been cleaved apart by a casual sword wave, not even splashing Ryo's pant leg. The humiliation still burned. Why? He muttered at a fallen leaf, fists clenching till his nails bit deep. Grandma's last words were for me to prepare for missions. Am I really going to spend my life splashing water at logs? I am a Senju. I belong on the battlefield. Then he remembered how the second Hokage Tobirama had died, and his defiance sank into dull self-pity. He punched the post beside him, shaking down a sprinkle of dust. Useless. He flopped over, muffling his voice in his arm. Ryo is a monster, and I am, just the leftover nobody. Nawaki-sama. Naoki-sama. A young attendant sprinted into the courtyard, gasping. Order from the Hokage. Tsunade-sama is to report to him immediately. Naoki blinked, still half dazed. Who? My sister. Now. Yes. And, Hokage-sama is very angry. Something about Danzo-sama. Before he could process that, the sharp clack of high heels struck the stone path outside, rapid and furious. Tsunade strode into the courtyard, sunlight gilding her silhouette in gold and flame. Her face all but said, I am in a terrible mood, do not test me. Dark rings bruised the skin beneath her eyes. Her red robe was stained with wine and grease, her hair a disheveled halo of wrath. The air around her shimmered with raw temper. Naoki swallowed hard. The word sis reached his throat, and wisely stayed there. Hokage's office, moments later. Bang. The door slammed open. Old man. You haunting me now. Trying to rush me into the grave. She bellowed before even stepping inside. People dying at the front, so what? I am on standby guarding Kushina, are I not? That is real work. I have fought half my life, can I not blow off steam without you losing your mind? I did not wreck your house. If Danzo is that desperate, let him haul the wounded back himself. Hiruzen's face turned blacker than soot. The sight of her outfit, and hearing her shout Kushina's name, was like salt rubbed into the wound left by Homura and Kaharu's earlier complaints. He slammed a palm on the desk so hard the pen holder jumped. Tsunade. His voice rumbled like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Do you even understand what you are saying? He rounded the desk, jabbing a finger at her nose. What was Mito-sama's dying wish? You. She wanted you to carry on after her, not to gamble away the Senju name and drag your teacher's face through the mud. You are the princess of Konoha, not some thug collecting debts in the street. The blast of authority made her instinctively step back. I. Save it. Hiruzen thundered on. Uzumaki Kushina is the village's keystone. The Nine-Tails transfer was days ago. That thing is not a kitten, it is a bomb. You of all people know how unstable that seal is. I left you here so if anything went wrong, you could stop the bleeding and save lives. That is your duty. That is what is at stake. He thrust a finger toward the window. That out there, the village, is what I am breaking my back to protect. Not your dice cup. He drew a long breath, forcing his fury into a colder edge. And yet, he said with a bitter smirk, you were the one who slammed my desk demanding Uchiha Makoto be placed under you. The squad list has been on your desk for days. You think being captain means doing nothing? Or are you scared now? Think I set you up to fail? Waiting to watch you crash and burn. The words hit like hammer blows. Scared. Cannot handle it. The taunt seared through her pride, burning away hesitation. Who was she afraid of? Him. Failure. Not a chance. Her hand went to her waist, the purse there hard and lumpy. She remembered the forgotten scroll inside. With a snarl, she yanked it out, half crumpled and stained with sake and grease. The Senju and Hokage seals were nearly rubbed away. Nonsense, she shot back. A good squad. You mean a pile of headaches you dumped on me. She tore it open, paper rasped under her hands. Her eyes flicked over the print. Team 8, Captain, Tsunade. Members, Kamiyama Ryo, Uzumaki Kushina, Uchiha Makoto. At Kushina's name, her rage stuttered. Mito's dying eyes flashed across her memory, clear, pleading. Kushina, out of the village. Over my dead body. She roared. You want the Nine-Tails running loose for fun. Not happening. Hiruzen folded his arms, cool again. Kushina is exempt. She will stay here to recover. Tsunade's fingers widened around the scroll. 2 names left. Ryo, the walking weapon. Makoto, an Uchiha political figurehead. A team too small to qualify. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Naoki, hovering in the doorway, dirty from training, eyes wide with unspoken longing. That same look he had worn every time she had packed for a mission. Grandmother gone, his hunger to prove himself had only grown. The afternoon's memory, his crushed expression under Ryo's effortless victory, rose unbidden. Hiruzen's goading still rang in her ears. Scared. Cannot handle it. The Senju were not cowards. They did not coddle their own like fragile glass. If she and Ryo could not protect one brat, they might as well quit and plant potatoes. Tsunade snatched the crooked pen from Hiruzen's desk and, without ink, stabbed it across the scroll's blank backside. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She slashed through Uzumaki Kushina, nearly tearing the paper, then scrawled 4 new characters in rough strokes, Senju Naoki. Here. She slapped the scroll into her brother's face. He caught it reflexively, the paper sticking to his cheek. Pulling it away, He blinked, and when he saw his name in the roster, his eyes bulged like lanterns. Tsunade did not even glance at him. She barked to the waiting servant at the door. Take that roster to personnel, now. Her shout drowned out Naoki's strangled, huh. That came from pure disbelief. And inform Uchiha Makoto, assemble at the village gate before dawn tomorrow. Her gaze snapped back to Naoki, still frozen like a statue. Listen up, brat. If you do not want me carrying your crying carcass on the battlefield while Suna nail your legs to the dirt, you had better get moving. Train that sorry excuse for chakra control till you can at least walk without blowing yourself up. She jabbed a finger at his nose, each word sharp as an icicle. Tomorrow. Before sunrise. 1 second late, and you can spend the rest of your life guarding the courtyard. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 77. Awakening. The overcast sky that had hung all morning finally allowed a thin ray of sunlight to break through, spilling lazily across the vast expanse of the third training ground. A few withered leaves spiraled down, landing on the damp earth, only to be swept away again by a passing chill wind. Tsunade stood at the edge of the field, arms folded, her brows furrowed in habitual irritation. It had only been a few days since she had finished handling her grandmother Mito's funeral, followed by Hiruzen's endless roaring lectures. The restless agitation in her chest had yet to fade. Her eyes drifted over to where Kushina was clinging to Ryo, chatting animatedly about who knew what. Tsunade shot them a sharp glare. Her gaze finally settled on Makoto, standing neatly in the center of the training field. Tsunade had to admit, the girl's bearing was exceptional. Her raven hair was tied back with a silk ribbon embroidered with the Uchiha clan's fan crest, revealing a smooth forehead and a slender neck. The modified dark high-collared training uniform outlined the budding elegance of youth, her movements infused with that innate Uchiha nobility carved deep into her bones. Composed expression, lips curved in a polite smile. A textbook noble lady. Tsunade snorted inwardly. Delicate little doll like this, her eyes flicked from Makoto's slim limbs to her own increasingly violent little sister Kushina, and then to that freakishly strong apprentice, Ryo. The battlefield isn't a temple fair. Kushina's endless pestering, plus that old fox Hiruzen's attempt to make amends by shoving this girl into Ryo's team, Tsunade rubbed her throbbing temples. Life and death are fate. If Makoto dares to be a ninja, she had better have the resolve that comes with it. Clearing her throat, Tsunade spoke, not loudly, but with that commanding presence only a top-tier shinobi possessed. It immediately silenced Kushina's chattering. Naoki, step forward. Naoki, who had been fidgeting with excitement and sneaking glances at Makoto, jumped to attention. Yes, sis. His face glowed with barely contained enthusiasm, his cheeks even flushed red. You. Tsunade pointed at Makoto, her tone brisk and decisive. Spar with her. Let's see what you've got. Naoki spun to face Makoto, took a deep breath, trying to sound steady, but his eyes betrayed his nervousness. Makoto, please take it easy on me. He could feel his heart hammering behind his ribs. His longtime crush, the perfect girl in every sense, face, figure, poise, talent. That gentle, refined aura so unlike his violent older sister, it was lethal to a boy who had grown up under Tsunade's rule. Makoto dipped her head gracefully. Naoki-senpai, please go easy on me. Her stance was textbook perfect, eyes focused, completely ignoring Kushina's silly winks from the sideline. Tsunade didn't even bother raising an eyelid. She exhaled sharply through her nose. Begin. Naoki's blood surged. He roared to psych himself up, drove his foot into the ground, and charged, a full-force frontal attack. Powerful, aggressive, but predictable. Makoto reacted instantly, sidestepping and raising both hands. Shish, shish, shish. A flurry of kunai flew out at impossible angles, sealing Naoki's path forward. Classic Uchiha shuriken technique, her fundamentals were solid. Naoki gasped, abruptly breaking his charge and tumbling awkwardly into a roll, spraying mud all over himself. Embarrassing, he groaned inwardly, hastily weaving signs. Earth release. Mud wall. The wall rose, but before he could catch his breath, Makoto had already finished her own sequence. Fire release. Great fireball technique. A blazing orange sphere the size of a basin roared forward, smashing into the earthen wall with a thunderous boom. The wall shuddered and crumbled, scattering burning fragments that forced Naoki to retreat several steps. Wiping the sweat and soot from his face, Naoki was both awed and anxious. She's good, really good. No backing down. Water release. Wild water wave. He inhaled sharply and unleashed a torrent. Makoto, calm and poised, danced lightly across the wet ground, moving like a butterfly through flowers. The water hissed past as her shuriken continued to harass Naoki with uncanny accuracy. The exchange quickened, fire, water, steel, and shouts colliding in the air. Naoki had more chakra and brute force, but lacked flexibility. Makoto's movements were refined, her ninjutsu fluid, her shuriken worked deadly precise. Flames flared, water splashed, metal clashed, it looked impressive enough. But to Tsunade and Ryo, it was little more than two rookies flailing. Tsunade nearly yawned. Ryo didn't even bother focusing on the match, his eyes occasionally drifted toward Kushina, who was busy digging at the dirt with a rock. Stop, stop, stop. Tsunade finally waved her hand, impatience dripping from her voice. Enough. You've been floundering for half a day, my nap's over already. Both combatants immediately halted, breathing hard. Naoki looked crushed, so much for impressing his crush. Makoto's face was flushed from exertion, strands of hair clinging to her cheek, making her appear even softer, but her stance remained steady. Tsunade stepped between them, her sharp eyes landing first on Naoki. How many times have I told you? Growing taller doesn't mean growing smarter. Charging headlong without thinking, keep that up and you'll be cannon fodder on the battlefield. Naoki winced, shrinking under her glare, face burning with embarrassment. Then Tsunade turned to Makoto. Her tone eased a fraction, though still cool. Your basics are solid. The Uchiha upbringing shows. Good with weapons, passable taijutsu, average ninjutsu. She paused, studying Makoto's calm yet expectant dark eyes, deciding bluntness was best. Girl, I'll be honest with you. Makoto's heartbeat stuttered. Her practiced smile stiffened slightly. Frankly, Tsunade folded her arms, a delicate girl like you should have gone into medical training. Her eyes flicked toward Kushina, who had perked up instantly, nervous as a cat. Tsunade's lips twitched. But my foolish little sister wouldn't stop crying and clinging to my leg, begging me to take you in. Well, even fools get lucky sometimes. It's rare she's found someone who treats her like a true friend. Tsunade's words struck Makoto's heart like a hammer. Her noble composure cracked, the serenity in her eyes shattered into shock, disbelief, and then overwhelming gratitude. Kushina, it was really because of her. Tsunade didn't pause. Her gaze deepened slightly, her voice lower, edged with weary realism. Besides, there are people in the village stirring things up, some political mess. She meant Hirazen's maneuvering. Tsunade didn't elaborate. There was no need for a girl Makoto's age to hear how the elders had shoved her into Ryo's team as compensation for clan politics. It's done. No point dwelling on it. Tsunade flicked her hand, brushing off the matter like dust. Since you're in my squad 8 now, you follow my rules. The battlefield isn't a playground. Understood? Yes, Tsunade-sama. Makoto answered clearly, voice trembling but firm. Dismissed. Naoki drooped as Tsunade dragged him off by the ear, lecturing the whole way. Kushina bounded toward Ryo, full of excitement, proudly boasting about how she had helped her best friend join the team. Ryo let her tug his arm, his face as unreadable as ever, listening silently to her cheerful chatter. No one noticed the storm quietly brewing in Makoto's eyes. The last rays of sunlight vanished behind a blanket of gray clouds, pressing down on Konoha with a suffocating weight. The long street of the Uchiha compound, filled with the faint scent of old sandalwood and the cold air of proud isolation, now felt to Makoto like a lonely, endless prison corridor. Tsunade's words, Kushina clung to my leg, crying and begging me to take you in, seared into her mind like a hot iron. Kushina's face, always smiling so openly, so trustingly, rose vividly in her memory. She had always treated Makoto as her dearest friend. Since their academy days, that had never changed. Her joys, her troubles, her silly infatuation with Ryo, all had been shared without reservation. Even those ridiculous, how to win Ryo's heart, plans, they had designed together. Guilt surged through Makoto's chest like an icy tide, drowning her instantly. What have I done? Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind like a curse. Power is a woman's nourishment. The wife of the Hokage, Uchiha will rise over Senju. Kushina's fate is tragedy. She's a Jinchuriki, a prisoner for life. That Ryo boy is your ladder to the top. Use your bride training to control him. That cursed bride training, every time she had helped Kushina devise ways to charm Ryo, every time she had watched his reactions under the guise of helping her friend, she had merely been rehearsing how to steal him. Rehearsing how to take her best friend's beloved for herself. For the sake of power. For the sake of her clan's ambition. Shame. Betrayal. The thrill of forbidden desire. Guilt as thick as poison vines wrapped around her heart, choking her breath. Ryo's image burned in her mind. Cold. Powerful. Unshakable as a mountain. And yet, he showed that rare, tender indulgence only toward Kushina, enough to make Makoto ache with jealousy. The Hokage's wife, Uchiha's glory, my own ambition. Her grandfather's expectations, her clan's burden. That forced destiny, that feeling of being used as a bargaining chip, it all boiled over again. Her thoughts tangled into chaos, her mind a battlefield of colliding armies. Gratitude and betrayal tore at each other. Duty and desire clashed violently. Her secret longing for Ryo warred with her guilt toward Kushina. Anger at being manipulated and shame at being exposed churned together. All of it fused into one molten, explosive surge within her chest. She stumbled at the Uchiha gate, nearly falling against the cold stone steps, nails digging into her palms. At that instant, something inside her shattered. The world suddenly shifted. Color drained from her vision. Everything dissolved into stark black and white, cold, jagged outlines of stone steps, twisted door frames, and the faded Uchiha crest above. Then from deep within her eyes, a searing crimson light burst forth. Like a drop of blood falling into still water, spreading outward. The Sharingan had awakened. A single black tomo slowly took form within the red, spinning faintly in her eye. Makoto clutched her face, warm tears slipping silently through her fingers, while her other eye burned cold, the tomo whirling in eerie stillness. The monochrome world before her seemed frozen and distorted, her heart pounding violently in her chest. The storm of emotion still raged within her, but now, the newborn power of her Sharingan suppressed it, sealing the chaos beneath a layer of icy calm. To be continued. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. Hollow Diamond 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 200 power stones. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 78. Special training before going to the battlefield. Water release. Wild water wave. Naoki's shout carried desperate determination as his hands blurred through seals so fast they nearly tangled. A surge of chakra exploded from his body, then a roaring jet of water shot from his mouth, racing straight toward Ryo on the far side of the field. The torrent was so fierce it looked ready to sweep the entire training ground away. Ryo didn't even bother lifting an eyelid. With a faint motion, he grasped the air with his left hand and flicked it casually. An invisible wind blade formed instantly. Shish. The water column split mid-air, bursting apart into a fine mist that drifted harmlessly across the ground. Ryo's pants didn't even get wet. Naoki froze in his ceiling stance, strands of wet hair plastered to his face. He stared blankly at the muddy mess before him, and at the man opposite, who hadn't even moved an inch. A wave of crushing defeat seized him, his fingernails digging into his palms. 15th time, Ryo said evenly, voice flat as still water. He didn't spare Naoki another glance. His eyes slid past the drenched boy to the red-haired girl standing tensely at the sidelines. Kushina. Why yes. Kushina jolted upright like a startled cat, fists clenched tight. Ryo's gaze settled on the faint blue chakra glow pulsing in her palm. The Rasengan's stability reflects your will. 693 chakra cycles. It's scattered. Start again. Fine. Kushina puffed her cheeks in frustration, and the blue sphere instantly fizzled out. Her eyes darted toward the front line. Ryo's going to the battlefield soon. A sharp ache bloomed in her chest, sour and anxious. Her nose burned. Not far away, Naoki wiped the water and dirt off his face, muttering under his breath, same thing again, I can't even make him move, am I useless? Did none of Grandpa's blood come through? He swallowed the rest of the words, voice trailing into a bitter growl. Save it, Naoki. Tsunade crossed her arms as she walked up, flicking him sharply on the forehead. At your current level, the only thing you'll do on the battlefield is provide target practice for the Suna shinobi. Ignoring Naoki's flushed embarrassment, she swept her eyes over the group. From today on, training intensity doubles. Her sharp gaze lingered on Naoki's pale face before shifting to the silent figure of Uchiha Makoto. The past 10 days had been nothing short of hell under Tsunade's relentless regimen. Naoki's body was a map of bruises and scrapes. Makoto, however, was Tsunade's personal target, forced through 3-hour sessions of non-stop weapon precision drills, with even the slightest mistake punished by 20 laps of weighted endurance running. Makoto's hair clung to her sweat-slicked cheeks, her face pale. Yet her dark eyes remained still as a frozen lake. Only occasionally, when they flickered toward Ryo and Kushina, did a trace of complicated emotion ripple beneath the surface. Hey! Focus! Tsunade's bark snapped Naoki out of his daze just in time for him to dodge a shuriken that whizzed past his ear. He shook his head violently, trying to banish thoughts of Sis's favoritism or Makoto's glance at him. Water. He gritted his teeth and forced chakra to gather once again. On the other side, Kushina stood with both hands extended. A pale blue sphere of energy spun violently in her palm, its unstable rotation drawing the surrounding air into a low, howling vortex. Sweat streamed down her temple. Hold it steady. Don't let it explode. Ryo's deep voice rumbled beside her ear, his breath stirring her hair, sending a faint tremor through her body. Kushina's cheeks flushed scarlet. She bit her lip and anchored her mind to the storming energy in her hands. Don't burst. Just as the sphere began to tremble, on the verge of detonation, a dry, steady hand covered hers. Phoom. The violent energy froze, compressed, collapsed inward, then reformed. In place of chaos, a smaller, brighter orb hovered in her palm, perfectly stable, glowing with a soft, mesmerizing blue light, like a miniature star. Like that, Ryo said, withdrawing his hand. Kushina stared at the obedient Rasengan resting in her palm, her heart still pounding from the near explosion. But beneath the adrenaline came a deep, swelling sense of safety and warmth. Ryo merely grunted. Keep it stable. On the battlefield, it might save your life. Kushina gazed up at his sharp profile. His words fell into her heart like pebbles dropped into still water, small ripples spreading wider and wider. He was leaving her soon. Leaving her behind in the grand old Senju estate that Grandma Mito had left her, a golden cage that suddenly felt emptier than ever. A sour lump rose in her throat. She bit her lip hard, forcing herself to focus on compressing the chakra sphere even tighter. The condensed ball hummed faintly in her palm, glowing blue, its light trembling like her heart. Time slipped away like sand through fingers, impossible to grasp. The day of departure arrived. A deep, grim trumpet call split the silent dawn, echoing coldly through the air from the direction of the Hokage's building. The chilling note hammered against every heart, brooking no defiance. Kushina stumbled out of bed, rushing onto the veranda. In the distance, near the village gate, she saw crowds gathering, countless figures moving in formation. Her heart clenched painfully, as though gripped by an invisible hand. The sunlight broke through the clouds, but it brought no warmth. The long street leading from the Senju residence to the village gate was lined with silent onlookers. Mothers clutching their children. Husbands forcing smiles at their wives. The eyes of old men clouded with worry. Soft sobs drifted through the heavy air like a muted background hum. Naoki, now in a brand new Chunin vest, stood tall beside Tsunade, scanning the anxious, tear-streaked faces around him. The excitement of youth going to war warred with the weight of fear pressing on his chest. Tsunade's sharp gaze flicked toward her brother. His Adam's apple bobbed, betraying his nerves despite his forced composure. The sight made her sigh inwardly. Then her eyes fell on Makoto. The girl walked quietly, head bowed. In the pale morning light, her face looked almost translucent, like a sculpture of ice. Tsunade frowned. That girl had been like this for days now. Ever since the last training session, when Tsunade had bluntly told her that Kushina had cried and begged her to join the squad, Makoto had grown quieter and colder. Those elegant Uchiha eyes now carried a depth that even Tsunade couldn't read. Keep up, Tsunade ordered curtly. Naoki responded instantly, quickening his pace. Makoto lifted her head. Her gaze slid past the crowd and locked onto the tall, solitary figure at the front of the column. The man her grandfather Uchiha Shana had called, the only ladder worth climbing, the one she had been told to control at any cost, Ryo. The Hokage's wife, the glory of Uchiha's rise. The words drummed in her head like poison. But when her eyes drifted to Kushina, clinging tightly to Ryo's arm, her eyes brimming with unrestrained attachment, something molten and venomous erupted inside her, burning through her chest, her lungs, her fingertips. She turned away quickly, unable to look any longer. Really leaving? Kushina's voice came out muffled, thick with the traces of recent tears. She rubbed her cheek against his arm like a forlorn kitten. Can't you stay just a few more days? To be continued. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 79. I'll reward you when you come back bonus. Ryo halted and turned toward her. The shadow of his tall frame almost swallowed her whole. The battlefield won't wait. He raised a hand and, with the lightest brush of a calloused fingertip, wiped away the damp trace at the corner of her eye. The motion was clumsy but focused. Remember what I told you? Kushina nodded hard, reddened eyes fixed on him without blinking. I'll check the seal space every day, keep my chakra steady, and I won't embarrass myself. Also. She counted rapidly on her fingers, as if grabbing hold of something slipping away. You promised you'd come back to see me often. Using that. Flying Thunder God. Looking at his familiar, hard-edged profile, Kushina felt a tiny sting at the tip of her heart, as if a small bug had taken a bite. She sniffed sharply, forcing the tears to retreat. The next second, she rose on tiptoe and leaned toward his ear. Her warm breath, tinged with the clean, sweet scent of soap, brushed his neck, her red hair tickled his skin. Then you have to promise me to come back alive. Kushina's voice was low and urgent, words tumbling out as her cheeks flushed as red as a ripe tomato. I'll reward you when you do. Not far away, Tsunade's ears pricked. She snapped her head around, golden brows lifting in dangerous angles, the air around her seemed to crackle. A storm front of mixed emotions, shameless little brat colliding with that punk better keep his hands off my pretty little Kushina, lowered the pressure around her in an instant. Kushina darted back, skittish and pleased like a mischievous little fox that had gotten away with something. She dropped her burning face in a hurry. Ryo's expression, however, remained composed, as if he wasn't the one who had just been given such a bold promise. All right. Haven't you finished saying your goodbyes? Tsunade's irritable bellow cracked like thunder, drowning out the murmur of muffled cries around them. Form up. Roll call. 1 second late and I'll mark you as deserters. Her gaze slashed toward Nawaki and Makoto. Nawaki jolted, instinctively wanting to keep watching Kushina and Ryo, and to catch the farewell drama with his crush, only to wrench his legs mid-step and dart like a startled hare to Tsunade's spot at the front. Makoto withdrew the last complicated glance she had sent toward Ryo, pressed her lips together, straightened her back, and walked quickly and quietly to the assembly point. As she passed the edge of the crowd, something gaunt and shadowed flickered in her peripheral vision. Uchiha Shana. He stood like a specter in a deeper pocket of shade at the street corner. Through a gap in the crowd, those clouded old eyes locked on Makoto, glittering with a greedy fervor, as if they could see the moment power returned to its throne. His gaze met hers, and the corner of his mouth tugged into a bladed-cold curve, something only Makoto could notice. His wrinkle-mapped fingers made the barest, most concealed motion against his chest, a slow, deliberate squeeze. The meaning was carved in bone. Crush your useless scruples, seize your ladder to the heavens, Uchiha's glory is in your hands. Then his withered fingers spread like talons and clenched into a heavy fist. Makoto's breath hitched. Her grandfather's silent signals splashed over her like a basin of bloodwater filled with ice. The guilt and betrayal she had only just managed to tamp down erupted again under this naked command. Reminder. Warning. No, the cruelest goad. Sharp emotions rammed through her chest, her vision swam. Deep in her eyes, that trace of crimson rose unbidden and began to turn. She jerked her head away, refusing to look in Shana's direction again. Her steps stumbled as she squeezed into the front ranks, ending up right behind Nawaki. Neck craned, he had been nervously trying to sneak peeks at Ryo and Kushina, and her slightly frantic movement bumped his shoulder, nearly knocking him off balance. Sorry. Makoto murmured, her voice carrying an uncontrollable tremor. She kept her gaze down, fixed on the cold seams between the stone slabs beneath her feet, as if sheer force of will could pin her in place. Ryo gave Kushina one last, deep look. In that look was room for all her confusion, grievance, and reluctance. He reached out, rough knuckles brushed gently at the dry corner of her eye. Wait for me to come back. Kushina's nose stung, her stubborn courage collapsed all at once. Tears spilled in heavy drops without warning, splashing hot against the back of Ryo's hand. She nodded hard. Her throat closed so tight she couldn't make a sound. All she could do was clutch his vest with everything she had, like someone clinging to driftwood before the flood of fate swept it away. At the front, Tsunade watched, and the irritation of the coming campaign tangled with the annoyance of having a team stuffed with headaches by old man Hiruzen, coiling into something more complicated. She drew a breath and tore open her voice like ripping the sky. It crashed down with iron finality. Time's up. Move out. The long line of shinobi began to move toward the village gate. Boots thudded on blue stone, each step landing heavy on the chests of those who stayed to see them off. Kushina watched as Ryo turned with crisp precision, his back straight and solitary as a spear, and merged with the flowing human tide. That familiar blaze of red hair shone in the sea of green flak jackets, so vivid yet quickly receding. Ryo. Kushina couldn't hold it back anymore. The cry tore out of her, ragged and hoarse with tears. Through her blurred vision, Kushina could only see that solitary silhouette growing smaller and smaller, until it vanished beneath the shadow of the village gate. Her tears streaked her cheeks and fell silently into the dirt at her feet. To be continued.